So you know that lab leak story that COVID came from a lab. Apparently it's true. U.S. Department of Energy says basically that is the most likely case. Though they're saying it was with low confidence, it seems, yeah. COVID likely leaked from a lab in China. Now, I suppose the question is, why are they now admitting it in the government? And perhaps it could be, I don't know, casus belli. The U.S. just had a spy balloon fly overhead. There may be a conflict with China coming, and the U.S. now wants to gear up public support for why there may be a war, and it actually is quite perfect. I think the reality is Dr. Fauci gave funding to an organization which then did gain-of-function research at the virus factory in Wuhan. That's what Seamus Coughlin called it. It was a good joke, Seamus. The virus factory. And then they didn't want to admit it. But we'll see. We don't know. Woody Harrelson, however, on Saturday Night Live he made a really funny joke about how Big Pharma, no, I'm sorry, he didn't say, they said the cartels bought up all the media and all the politicians and locked everyone in their homes, and they could only leave if they did the cartel's drugs over and over and over again. He's getting a lot of heat for that. So we'll talk about that. I guess it's an interesting day. And Scott Adams is apparently getting canceled from everything. Dilbert, his comic, was being canceled because he was commenting on a poll from Rasmussen that said 26% of black people who were polled disagreed with the statement, it's okay to be white. And then he commented on that saying, you should stay away from these people, among other things. But we'll get into the details of what he said to get specific with it, because I'm sure people are people on all sides are offended by what's happening. Before we get started, my friends, head over to timcast.com. Click the Join Us button and become a member, because we're going to have a members-only show coming up around 10 p.m. tonight. So when this show wraps up live, it goes from 8 to 10. We then set up the live members-only portion at timcast.com, which will then get archived and be available for you to watch whenever you want. But now you can also watch live. Plus, we got a bunch of other really awesome stuff. The new show that we launched last Friday, The Culture War with Tim Pool. First episode got like 150,000 hits, which is pretty big for your average podcast. It's on YouTube, though, so maybe you'd expect a little bit more. We've got a bunch of really great guests that are coming up. They're not all political. We've got a musician coming. We've got a tech guy the next week after that. And I'm sorry, not a tech guy. We have a very prominent cultural figure that I don't want to say who until we get absolute confirmation, but it's going to be really, really interesting. So check out that at youtube.com/Timcast, where I had a conversation for a couple hours with Ali London, who at one point, he's a British man, was transgender Korean woman. And then he detransitioned. He talks about his identity issues. You can check out The Culture War with Tim Pool on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. But smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends. Joining us tonight to talk about this and so much more is Justin from Fenix Ammo.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, who are you? What do you do?
My name is Justin. I'm the CEO of Fenix Ammunition in Novi. We're a family-owned ammunition manufacturing company. We're the self-appointed voice of the militia industrial complex, as we like to call ourselves, not the military industrial complex. We sell 100% of our products to retail consumers, no government, no police, no contracts like that.
And no Biden voters, right?
That's right, no Biden voters.
No, but literally you banned Biden voters.
Yep, yeah, we did that. We had a disclaimer on our website for about a year and a half that we didn't want to sell to people who voted to
ban guns.
Ban guns and ban our way to do business. So, yeah, from our hands to yours, we're the farm-to-table version of the ammo industry, and that's who we are.
Right on. And we could probably eventually talk about the pistol brace ban that's going into effect, because this is actually a lot of people, if you're not into guns, you're not concerned about this. The crazy thing about this story is, to put it simply, a federal agency has just enacted or is about to enact a law without Congress where they will jail you by decree. And that's I guess the scary version of the story, but we'll get into all those details. So Justin, thanks for hanging out.
Yeah.
We got Hannah Claire Brimelow hanging out.
Hi, I'm Hannah Claire Brimelow. I'm a writer for timcast.com. Can't talk today. Farm to Table Ammo is hilarious. You should follow at Timcast News on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks for having me.
Just grow your own black powder.
Yeah, what do you do? Do you scrape the bat crap off or whatever? Is that no? But that's black powder.
Yeah, black powder is different.
That's
old
school.
Ammo.
Unfortunately, we wish we could make our own, but we're still sort of beholden to the suppliers.
It's very different. It's smokeless powder these days.
Yeah.
Black powder was bat crap.
Planting bullets in a field and they sprout up and bullets.
Maybe we can pull the carbon out of the air.
That's how they get made. Yes.
No, they used to. It was bat crap, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Some guy was ammonium nitrate.
If I take this bat crap, I can make it I can shoot somebody. That's a
You
crazy.
think
See,
that, like,
Americans are so innovative. I love it.
were like
well,
mines
I think it was
exploding?
the Chinese, but
Great. All kinds of people are innovative.
Were they like the mines were blowing up? They're like, why are they blowing up? It's the bat crap, and then they found out that's
that makes
explosive.
sense. Bats were all in caves, crapping everywhere, building up
Yeah,
ammonia.
could be.
nitrate.
Yeah.
Watch out for that.
Well,
crap.
let's talk about that. I guess.
let's go deep.
We got Serge pressing the buttons.
Yo, guys, I got a new mixer here, so I'm going to be EQing everyone as we go. Let's roll.
Here's the story from the New York Times. Lab leak most likely caused pandemic, Energy Department says. The conclusion, which was made with low confidence, came as America's intelligence agencies remain divided on the origins of the coronavirus. And I love, they have this picture of the virus factory in Wuhan. The Wuhan, Seamus Coughlin tweeted, remember when a virus emerged outside of this, in the city next to the virus factory? And then they told you were crazy for claiming that the virus may have come from the city with the virus factory?
Seems crazy.
But anyway.
Indeed.
So here's real quick, just to show you a couple things so we get into this conversation. I'm not saying I trust the government. Okay, the DOE is saying this is most likely, and I'm like, I agree. It's just one agency saying it's probably the case, and it probably is the case. But I want to show you these archives. Take you back in time. You want to read that one, Ian?
So as Tom Cotton keeps repeating a coronavirus conspiracy theory that was already debunked.
The Washington Post reported this February of 2020. They said Senator Tom Cotton repeated a fringe theory suggesting that the ongoing spread of the coronavirus is connected to research in the disease-ravaged epicenter of Wuhan, China. Cotton referenced a laboratory in the city, the Wuhan National Biosafety Lab, blah, 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 blah. So, about that.
He should just
and then
make
we have this one
headline
from
his like banner on Twitter.
Oh, he should. The New York Times. Senator Tom Cotton repeats fringe theory of coronavirus origins. In an interview on Fox News, the Arkansas lawmaker raised the unsubstantiated possibility that the new coronavirus originated in a high-security biochemical lab in China. And the New York Times, February 17th, 2020, called it a fringe theory. And so this is a couple days ago, this is 26, yesterday, lab leak most likely caused pandemic. What's it called when you say a bunch of stupid things and then have to, New York Times and the Washington Post have edited those articles to remove their stupidity from them because, everybody's basically saying, well, the virus probably escaped the place that make coronaviruses.
I remember seeing this on Tucker Carlson right around that time. It was either the same day he made that statement or the day after. And thinking to myself, this makes the most sense. There's a lab there. People don't really understand how many leaks occur at biosafety labs, even here in the United States. I mean, that's how people believe. What's the disease? Lyme disease. Yeah, a lot of people think Lyme disease was the product of a BSL lab leak that's on an island off the coast of New York. There's one in I mean, that was a big thing for a while. They were building one in Fort Detrick.
You don't get to make all these movies where the scientist gets pricked through their suit and they go, oh God, and they run out and then have people think these labs are completely safe.
Yeah, Lyme disease was found near Lyme, Connecticut.
Right.
And that's why they call it Lyme disease. They don't know
Yeah.
exactly where or why. I wouldn't be surprised if it was. I've heard the same thing, that it was done on an island, like a biomedical experiment.
I just like the idea that the federal government's like, but that only happens in movies. Movies are based completely on fiction. We would never do anything like it.
Yeah, even this announcement, it still says, we have concluded, meaning it is done, that it might have happened over there. We don't know.
It's the ultimate
We don't
soft
know.
launch of a explanation, right? You know, some girls like soft launch their boyfriends on Instagram. The government is soft launching that they're admitting it was from the
A/B
lab.
testing.
We're
See which
low
one
confidence.
works.
We're not sure, but we've done all of our research and we're basically
But
pretty
so
sure.
what's the likelihood that this is a casus belli for war with
Yeah,
with
this
China?
is definitely an opening for a war, for sure. If they needed one.
Well, right.
They're setting the
think,
stage.
think of it this way. If China invades Taiwan, how does the United States get the American people to publicly support a war with China?
Blame all of COVID on them.
Exactly. Remember that your parents who died? It was China. Yeah, we just found that out. And then people are going to be screaming in the polls and the media will come out and they'll march in lockstep. But sure enough, you're still going to get... Actually, this is interesting. Let me walk... I was going to say something different. I'm going to walk it back a little bit. I'm curious. Would conservatives remain anti-war if the U.S. government came out definitively across the board and said, we have direct evidence that they were breaking international law with gain-of-function research and they caused the global pandemic?
I think so because a lot of people know that Fauci was working with EcoHealth Alliance to do the research. So it wasn't just the Chinese. A lot of people are aware that Anthony Fauci and probably the U.S. government was involved as well. So I think that will be a loud noise being made and statement that's repeated, like Fauci was involved in this. And
what I'm asking is, the U.S. will want to go to war with China over Taiwan. Will conservatives now support international intervention?
Actually, I think it's the opposite, and I think that's the reason that conservatives wouldn't support it because, like for me personally, I would say, well, why are we going to war with China until Fauci is put on trial and until everybody in the United States that had any part in this is dealt with, then we can talk about China, but only until that happens.
That's what I meant.
I think it'd be hard to sell that going to war would do anything at this point,
right?
Right?
Yeah,
like we're gonna send more people to die after putting them through everything we have for the past 3 years. With war, and maybe this is just a very rudimentary understanding of it. It's not like we'll take a chunk of land from China and then we'll be like, and that solves everything for COVID, right? Like I could see issuing tons of economic sanctions. I could see breaking trade partnerships, but actually going to battle with them. I actually feel like if you just said it's about Taiwan, there are more Americans who'd be like, okay, sounds good, than if you said COVID.
Yeah, that's why I brought up the people knowing that Fauci was involved in financing and working on the stuff through EcoHealth. People would not want to go to war because they know that Fauci was involved. So that would be like, I'm not going to buy the crap. You can't pin this on China. We know that there were American scientists involved in building this thing. Mm-hmm. At least evidence points to that.
Fauci provided funding to EcoHealth, who then provided funding to Wuhan's lab or whatever.
We pay you to pay him to pay him to do it for me.
It's virus laundering or something.
I think really what this is just the long tail setup for their plan for the 2024 election. And I mean, I was thinking about this a year and a half ago, where especially if Trump runs again, they're gonna put COVID and the vaccines and all of it on Trump. That's what I think. I think they're gonna say, hey, he left Fauci in office. He pushed the vaccine through too quickly because he wanted to puff his chest up and show how good he was. And look at all these people that died as a result of Trump's ego. So it's all his fault. It's going to be just like, projection is their only tool. So
what if they come out and they say, we have now confirmed Wuhan was doing illegal gain-of-function research with the assistance of Anthony Fauci through circuitous funding, and thus we will be filing subpoenas and criminal referrals for Anthony Fauci, and then said, after they arrest him, we are going to go to war with China. So let me put it this way. China invades Taiwan. The U.S. says we're going to defend our allies in the region, but we can't be directly involved with China. Oh, whoa, China leaked the virus on purpose and caused all this damage. And hey, what's that? Fauci was involved. Fauci, you're under arrest. Hey, guys, can we go to war now?
I don't know. I got to be honest with you. I think I wouldn't really describe myself as a conservative particularly, but I think the sort of war hawk side of the party is getting smaller and smaller. I mean, with everything going on in Ukraine, and I really can't see a huge number of people being, especially China. I mean, you're talking about two world superpowers.
It feels like
going at each
opening
other.
another endless war, right? Like, didn't we just get out of the Middle East in some respect?
And we're already spending more money in Ukraine than we spent in Afghanistan. I just can't. It's so. There's so much media now that the days of like the Gulf of Tonkin and these things where they can stage an event and they can get people riled up, and they've got this like dead zone before the truth really comes out, and then you get momentum going, and people are so afraid to go back on what they said. They're like it's like the sunk cost fallacy. I just think that time is coming to an end these days.
I think
everything's on video.
I think the U.S. I don't know. Maybe they're just realizing they can't keep lying about this because any sane person. Jon Stewart goes on Colbert's show and says this makes the most sense, but I'm wondering. I guess I should put it this way. My prediction would be, in the event the U.S. does want to go to war, China invades Taiwan, the U.S. comes out and says, oh, heavens, the lab leak, that was China's fault. The majority of the MAGA side of people, which includes some libertarians, independents, they all say, no war. And then your McCarthys and your McConnells, your Lindsey Grahams are just like, Everybody was ragging on China just 10 minutes ago, and we can't allow this. You can't change your mind and now act like they're the good guys. And then the Democrats are going to come out and be like, China's always been the bad guy. What are you guys talking about? Conservatives, you're always defending Xi Jinping. And
Hillary Clinton's like, I loved Vladimir Putin all of these years.
well, no, they'll still hate Russia, but they're going to come out and be like, why won't you support our wars? And then every journalist, every news outlet's going to come out. Every poll's going to be like, we surveyed 5 billion people and found that 95% want war with China. So if you don't agree, you're a weirdo. And then you're going to get a bunch of normie people in cities being like, oh, yeah, okay, I guess World War III or whatever.
I bet if they were to be like, and by the way, Anthony Fauci is involved, something, Anthony Fauci would be like, and by the way, I have documents of Barack Obama being involved, Bill Clinton being involved. I have evidence of the Clinton Foundation being involved. Like,
if it was all
Fauci
that, though,
is the nexus of this stuff, and he knows everybody that's working on this.
I mean, he's very specifically NIH, but it would be funny if just like some guy no one ever heard of shows up, and then he just starts putting out all this evidence on all of these people, and it's like the government's actually run by someone like some shadow government no one ever heard of, like an Epstein level guy. I mean, because the reality is that there's probably some big corporate lobbyists. Shout out to Woody Harrelson. He's talking about these cartels. There's probably some big corporate lobbyists that you've never heard of, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, whatever, who come to these people, these politicians, tell them what they need in exchange for funding, and you've never heard of these people.
Yeah, and
That's
they'll
a crazy
send
thought, huh?
someone to talk to the politician, so the politician doesn't even know who the people are.
So it's not even like shadow government conspiracy level stuff. It's like we know these big investment firms exist. We don't know who's doing the principal lobbying, but the politicians do.
Yeah.
That's true.
They know who's coming to them and telling them like, look, we need this bill passed. Otherwise, your PAC's not getting the $100 million. And they're like, but if I don't get that, I don't win. You're right. So better get the bill passed. And they go, you got it, boss.
Oh, they're already those guys already investing in Ukraine, BlackRock, and
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what I heard.
About what an opportunity it is.
And think about the war debt Ukraine's going to have.
Oh,
This war is actually, it's more like the U.S. is conquering Ukraine. All the money being given to Ukraine will justify the U.S. owning the whole thing, or I should say Europe and NATO owning the whole thing. Because in the event that Russia loses, Vladimir Zelensky is going to be like, yay, freedom. Now, don't forget, you owe BlackRock $100 billion.
Yeah.
And you will never pay it back.
Well, just like China has the Belt and Road Initiative, right, where they're subsidizing the building of infrastructure in third world countries, especially in Africa. They're paying for the cell towers and the freeways, and that's because they can get the data from the cell towers, in particularly. But they want them to be beholden, and I think that's sort of what we do is we go in and destroy everything first, and then we rebuild it in the way that we think we want to, in the way that benefits our investors and these big capital firms. So, we're fine to watch Ukraine get shelled into oblivion, which is what's happening, right? I mean,
because not only do they have the $100 billion in debt already, but after the war ends, our firms, or I shouldn't say our, but international firms come in and say, okay, now you're going to rack up another $500 billion in debt as we rebuild your country for you.
Yeah.
And we will own you forever.
they're not going to have the infrastructure left at the end. So the fact of the matter is they can't rebuild their country without concrete plants and, steel, fiber optics, all these things that they're not going to have the capability to make. So we can go in there and do it for them. And that's really the profit motivation for those companies.
Build a smart grid to track and database.
Yeah, smart grid, right. We got to upgrade it. Everything's going to be Wi-Fi, wireless now. And
it used to be that the U.S. would invade a foreign piece of land and liberate it. At least in one instance, the Spanish, the Spanish-American War at the end of the 1800s, they went into Cuba, the Americans, and they liberated Cuba from the Spanish Empire. And Cuba became its own thing. The U.S. didn't even want it. They weren't like, pay us back. As far as I know, they didn't want to extort them or anything. So Cuba was free. And then Cuba became communist and very dangerous for the Americans. So we
should invade, is what you're saying.
I'm wondering, like, when we do go in to liberate, is it better that we leave Americans there to control it? Or do we actually just let them be totally free? Because freedom isn't free. We have freedom in the United States because we have dudes with guns pointing them at all the bad guys and forcing this area to maintain the semblance of what we have defined as freedom.
Maybe we should invade these countries and then put our troops there for 20 years and then build military bases all around.
30 years.
30 years.
Because that doesn't work either. I mean, not really.
No.
South Korea seems to be working.
Puerto Rico, did we do that in Puerto
what
Rico?
we should do is invade the country and then hand an AR-15 to every single citizen and say, now you guys are on your own.
I don't know, man.
You've got a fair fight with the government now. You have what we have, which is the only thing that has kept our country from being different from the rest of the world.
I
we're going to
disagree.
liberate you by we are going to install the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, and the Second Amendment, and then we're going to
I don't think it would
leave
work.
you to your devices.
I don't think it would work.
You don't think so?
either.
Nope. The American colonies had moral structures and
Shared culture. I mean,
shared culture, moral foundations, and classical liberal principles. They were shared among the founding fathers. So they were kind of like, leave me alone.
Fair.
And that worked. You go to a place where it's like authoritarian religious fanatics and give them a bunch of guns, then you're going to get 15 different sects just shooting each other nonstop for 50 years. I'm not saying we should go there and change things. I'm saying cultures need to develop and get to that point. There's perhaps diplomacy that we could employ that might help, put them in a direction we think would ultimately reduce violence and increase prosperity. But I don't think guns. A First Amendment, probably. Give people the right to speak freely, share ideas, and you
Doesn't
might...
exist though without the Second
Yeah.
Amendment. That's the problem. I mean, I think that's really,
No, that's a good point. Yep. We
think-
want them to be able to speak freely, but then the government comes and beat the crap out of them.
Yeah. I think it's hard to accept that if we were to go into a different country and say, you guys are free to decide what you want, that they may install a system that, number one, doesn't work. Like, do we go back then and fix it? And also, they may pick a system that we don't like, right? Like, if communism is what ultimately Cuba decided would work, I'm not saying it did, but that was what came out on top when they were allowed to pick, I would not, if I were, John Kennedy or whatever, I would not want to be like, yes, Cuba, you just have your communism and hang out over here while we have democracy. But on the other hand, do you just keep going in and saying like, no, you have to do it our way, you have to do it our way, you have to do it our way, especially like we were saying before, if there are countries that are dominated by cultural or religious pressures that are so dissimilar to what we were founded on. Like, we don't have the same kind of basic needs that other civilizations do.
I was talking to Ali London on the Culture War podcast with Tim Pool. Check it out on Apple and Spotify and youtube.com/Timcast. One of the interesting things he said to me, shameless plug, was that in Korea, they all get surgery to look like European people. Like they'll get their chins shaved down and they'll get their noses, they'll get nose implants to make their noses bigger, and they'll get their eyes made to be wider with surgery so they can look like white people. And it's a normal thing for all of them. We thought it was like, we talk about how crazy it is that a British guy would want to get surgery to look Korean. But to him, he said he was living in Korea. That was normal. Mm-hmm. Everybody was getting surgery to look like the specific thing. So he was trying to look like they were. Mm-hmm. I don't think the U.S. occupying South Korea, whatever you call it, whatever you want, has necessarily been good for them. But certainly it's been better than if it was North Korea the communists that took over. So yeah, I don't know. It's like they went in the complete other direction. But it's still better, I guess.
It's tough to talk with confidence about life in Korea because I've never been. But from Yeonmi Park's first-hand perspective, she's a North Korean defector, I guess you call it. She was able to escape the country because you can't leave freely. I believe that North Korea is absolutely one of the biggest pieces of hell on earth of any nation.
Imagine.
100%.
Well, and South Korea, yes, there are Western beauty standards that become a part of culture. But on the other hand, like America has never generated anything like the K-pop industry, right? Producing K-pop stars who then go through plastic surgeries to look American. Like we never mastered it. Like Korean culture is still strong and it has some interpretations of Western influence, but I would never say that it's lost its culture to a Western identity.
I went to a shopping area in Seoul, and they had this advertisement for like Chicago pizza, and then one of the pizza varieties was black squid ink, and I'm just like, we don't have that in Chicago, but it's tourist stuff.
What? No way.
Yeah, it's like I went to Thailand and I went to get pad Thai, and I was like, I want squid, and then my Thai friend started laughing at me, and he was like, bro, it just means like shrimp and noodles, like you're asking for shrimp and noodles, but like imagine ordering a cheeseburger but with chicken, just order a chicken sandwich, and I'm like, I don't know, in America we have like Americanized Thai food, you know what I mean?
Right.
So he's like, you want to go get real Thai food, and then he brought me to an actual restaurant, and we sit down, and you know what the real Thai food is? It was steamed chicken and rice. I was in Brazil, and I was like, I want real Brazilian food. He's like, all right, we got steak and rice.
Yeah.
There's like nothing complicated about it. Like people around the world typically eat a lot of this similar things. Different spices depending on the area, but in America, we dump sugar, fat, and oil on it.
everything. Yeah.
Spice it a certain way, and we're like, if there's like brown sugar, vinegar, ginger, it's Chinese. If it's curry, it's Indian. But in reality, it's like, Not really. I think a lot of the Indian food was invented in Britain anyway.
Yeah. There's a really interesting documentary about the spread of Kung Pao chicken and like how that was developed, and especially as you came to America and you had these Chinese restaurants. There were a couple really high-end, culinary experiences, but a lot of them were considered sort of cheap or convenient meals, and they spread throughout the U.S. And they had to come up with a dish that was like palatable to Americans that they would eat, but also wasn't so complicated that they would not want to eat it. It's similar to the man who founded Taco Bell. He was like, I'm going to. He grew up in California, and he grew up wanting to have a hamburger stand. He was like a kid in the Depression, then he went to war, and then he came back and was like, there are hamburger stands everywhere, so I got to do something else. And there was a Mexican influence in the area he grew up in, and so he was like, I'll make tacos, but I'll make them with flour tortillas and with lettuce, and basically like made it the most simple, like it gets compared to a hamburger. It's not really a traditional Mexican taco, but at the same time, it's something that people will eat and they recognize the flavor. It's not too intimidating.
I'm pretty sure when they introduced Taco Bell to Mexico, they called it American food.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Failed. Like it didn't work. Nobody wanted to eat that. Well, here's the thing too. Mexican. When you go to a Mexican restaurant, you're actually going to a Tex-Mex restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like, I'm sure people have been to real Mexican restaurants, but real Mexican restaurants like fajitas, like chicken and veggies and rice. The burrito taco stuff, that's Tex-Mex. Like burritos too.
And like queso. Like queso
Yeah,
is a
stuff like
Tex-Mex
that.
specialty.
Flour
Let's-
tortillas
let's-
are rough. I've gone corn, basically.
Corn's better. I think
Yeah.
corn's better. Let's stop talking about the foods of the world and go back to the news. So we'll get back to COVID. We have the story from from the Washington Post. I love how we were just ragging on the Washington Post, and now we're going to rag on them again. On Saturday Night Live, Woody Harrelson pushes popular COVID-19 conspiracy theory. The actor worked in a joke during his monologue that repeated a pandemic plot favored by vaccination opponents. Notice how she didn't say exactly in the headline what he said. Because Woody really, and I don't think they even
Is it
actually
even in the
showed.
first three paragraphs?
Oh,
No.
here it is. Yeah, he says, do they have the quote? He says, in a monologue filled with references to his abiding use of marijuana, the actor who went
I mean, that's hilarious just right there, because like the left has always historically been like the pro pot side.
And now
right?
they're like,
but
"Ooh,
now
this
they're
crazy
using
guy."
it as a cudgel to beat him with, only
right.
because he's not saying what
Here's
they
what he
want.
said.
This drug-addled guy.
He read a script where the biggest drug cartels in the world get together to buy up all the media and all the politicians and force all the people in the world to stay locked in their homes. And people can only come out if they take the cartel's drugs and keep taking them over and over. I threw the script away. I mean, who's going to believe that crazy idea? Being forced to do drugs? I'd do that voluntarily all day long. And so that was his joke. And the live audience offered scattered laughter, but viewers at home had much more visceral reactions. What I love is, it's like there's like a paradox in this article. The media is being made fun of for calling this an anti-vax conspiracy. It's like, well, hold on there a minute. Big Pharma literally lobbies the government. That's not in dispute. Yeah. They go to politicians and they say...
More than any other industry.
Yeah, they're massive. They made $100 billion. They had guaranteed no liability contracts. And we've all seen the video, brought to you by Pfizer, brought to you by Pfizer, brought to you by Pfizer.
They brought us everything cool this year.
They're buying ads like crazy. They buy ads like crazy. They sell products. They lobby politicians. Woody Harrelson wasn't saying any kind of conspiracy theory. No. He was making a joke about... every joke has its truth. Big pharmaceutical corporations lobbied government and the media to try and convince people to take their drugs. It's a product. They got no liability contracts, made a lot of money off it. Now they're calling Woody Harrelson a conspiracy theorist, but I'm not here to talk about the negative. And I don't want to sit here and just rag on media like we always do. I want to praise Woody Harrelson and say, "Hey, look, man, people are pushing back. This is a mainstream celebrity hosting SNL. Talking about we should not let massive multinational corporations dictate what we can or can't do." That seemed to be the message, right? All right, so we're good. All right. Victory?
Yes.
I just think it's funny that they're like, you're a conspiracy theorist. Like, if this wasn't a direct comparison to what you were doing, you wouldn't be so threatened by it. Like, if you weren't doing something shifty, don't freak out, right? I just think his monologue, first off, like, it wasn't the funniest monologue in all of SNL history. It's just that he came close to a subject that makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah, he touched the third rail.
And then everyone lined up exactly like you thought they would. Like the Washington Post, everyone else is like conspiracy theorists.
Maybe because he was saying people were locked in their homes. In the United States, I'd have never heard of anyone being locked in. There were in China that I heard they were being welded into their homes, so locked in.
Yeah, China was way more
I
severe.
think Australia were sending people to camps where they couldn't leave their front porch, so locked in that instance.
But they're locked in
Camps in Australia.
some respects because you couldn't go to school, you weren't allowed to go to businesses.
Functionally locked.
Functionally, you couldn't go anywhere. You weren't allowed to go to parks. They filled in the sand pits at the skate parks. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they kept they took away anything that would be worth leaving your house for.
But I like how in Australia, they went to indigenous areas and neighborhoods and literally kidnapped children and then brought them to camps. And then there was one viral story where some teenagers jumped the fence and escaped and ran for it. And they got hunted down.
And they got picked up at a bar they were hanging out at that night.
And I'm like, these are concentration camps. And then people like Claire Lehman of Quillette were like, no, it's not. The government taking people and concentrating them in one area without charge or trial is not a concentration camp. Stop being so silly.
It's for their own good. Stop the spread.
And I'm like, the government's rounding up indigenous Australians and putting them in camps. And they're like, but because of COVID. And I'm like, I didn't say not because of COVID. I just said they're doing it.
I think that Woody making this joke and talking about this publicly on one of the most popular television shows on earth and being one of the most popular actors on earth, alongside with the government's acknowledgement that it was made in a laboratory, most likely, or they've concluded that it was probably done in a lab.
Low confidence.
I think it's all happening at once, and it's great.
Can I just, I want to say something, because, I have this here Coca-Cola in a glass bottle that I just drank before the show. And I don't drink a lot of soda, if ever. But we do have guests who do like soda. And so, I don't want to get cans. Cans are okay, or bottles, plastic bottles, get out of here. So we got glass bottle Coke with real sugar, real cane sugar. And of course, everyone knows this is the famous Mexican Coca-Cola. And I was just drinking this and I thought to myself, that's kind of crazy that in Mexico, you will get a glass bottle, no phthalates, no PCBs, no endocrine disruptors, made with cane sugar, no high fructose corn syrup. And it's probably cheaper in Mexico in terms of buying power. So in terms of the Mexican economy, how much you have to work to get a Coke is probably less work than in the United States. But in the US, you're getting plastic garbage with endocrine disruptors and high fructose corn syrup. Isn't that just weird? Like in the United States, we are poisoning and degrading ourselves. Like, why? I don't know.
By choice. I mean, I think we're the only country that mandates fluoride in the water, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't know about the only country.
We may be. If we're not the only, it's very few. I was going to say this earlier too, just to give people some perspective. In 2000,
no, everybody does it.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I thought Europe. Oh, I know that you can't in Europe. Most European countries, it's not mandated.
A bunch of the UN countries.
Yeah,
I think the dark red ones are mandated. And then the other ones are like, I don't know.
So
we're one of the only.
In
doesn't
Australia,
really-
it's mandated.
And then what was that South American country?
It doesn't explain what the different shades
Ecuador?
mean, but
No, what is that country?
which one where?
South America.
This?
Yeah.
That looks like, is that Venezuela? Is that Colombia? Or I think it's Colombia, is it?
Bolivia and Colombia. That's so sad that I don't know that. I think Colombia and Bolivia are in the middle, but let's just check. Who knows? Somebody knows in the chat.
What were you saying?
People are gonna be like,
I was going to
"Bro."
say, just for perspective, so people understand, in 2022, the pharmaceutical industry spent $284 million on lobbying, right? So to give some comparison, my opponents
Colombia.
on the anti-gun side of the table always talk about how much money that the gun lobby spends. It was less than 14 million. So 280 something million pharmaceutical industry versus less than 14.
Maybe we
What year?
maybe we need to get it so that
2022,
you get
last
the vaccines are delivered by
gunshot.
Dude,
less lethal, plastic, and it'll be like a pepper ball of some sort.
I mean, wasn't that was X-Men, right?
Was it? Oh yeah, they had the cure. They would shoot with a tranq dart.
Yeah.
Maybe
thank you.
Maybe that's the roundabout way you do it. You have the Republicans pass a law saying that vaccines can only be delivered by a dart of some sort fired from a gun. Then they get the pharmaceutical lobby being like, "Don't ban guns. Don't ban them."
We love those. They're necessary.
Yeah.
But
then they're going to be like, you pull them to a 7-Eleven parking lot, and the doctor goes, "Don't move," hits you in the arm, and you're like, "Oh, I feel great, doc."
Oh, what are you going to say?
No, you go.
I haven't been taking people keep sending me these stories about graphene being in the vaccines and that people are being tracked.
No.
There's actually a patent where they want to track people based on the graphene in their bloodstream or something. And I just keep dismissing it because it sounds so ridiculous. But I just received like 3 messages about it over the weekend. I want to pull it up.
I really do not believe there's graphene.
No, there is. There's graphene in the vaccine. Who did died suddenly. They did a whole report on this. I can send you a link if you want.
But like to what extent and what's the point of it and what does it do?
That is beyond my graphene knowledge. I'm going to send the report to Ian, and he'll let us all know.
If that's true, then I got to question Ian's loyalties. Who are you working for, Ian?
Well, the thing about materials
He's
is
working
they'll be
for
used
Pfizer.
for
He's a
good
plan.
and
I knew it.
It's a plan.
like the
Everyone's
nuclear
like,
bomb.
we know it.
The nuclear program was so amazing because it ended up winning us the war, World War II, but also so devastating because it gave people access to nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
Same with graphene. It's going
There's
to be
a duality to everything.
Yeah, it'll be remaking roads, buildings, rails, all that, but people will be making new weapons with it, tracking.
Yeah, I mean that's the history
electronics.
of the. I mean the reason that we have such a robust defense and in particular firearms industry here in this country is because we won the revolution, and now all of a sudden we're on our own. The French were our allies only insofar as they want to, but now they see us as a young, potentially vulnerable nation. We were buying all of our weapons from our allies or what we took over with us from Britain. And so we basically had to recreate our own weapons manufacturing. I mean, this is, of course, back in the day when everything was made by hand, right? I mean, lock, stock, and barrel, that was the old saying. So
the corporate press says
that's why it's such a big industry here. People don't really understand. They think how did that culture develop here in the U.S. But it was because we had to create it literally from scratch to be able to defend ourselves.
The corporate press says no graphene oxide in the vaccines. I wonder if what people are confusing is that they used graphene oxide in the manufacturing process. It is not in the vaccine because some of the things I'm seeing are people talking about fetal cells in the vaccine. Fetal cells are used in the development of these, in like testing and production, but the final product doesn't contain the cells themselves. I actually think that's an argument. What we saw a lot of was people saying they didn't want to take it because they used fetal cells to make the vaccine. And then the media was like, no, there's no fetal cells in the vaccine. Well, hold on. That's not what people were saying. They were saying that to make the product, to invent it, to test it, you used fetal cells. So we're not okay with that. It's like we, in order to test this, we injected a bunch of monkeys. Those monkeys died. But don't worry, these vaccines contain no monkey. And it's like, well, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you killed monkeys to do it. So I don't know to what extent people are talking about graphene oxide, but I think it was maybe in like the manufacturing process.
That's my guess. A lot of times that's a big problem with the food industry is they'll show you the ingredients of the food, but they don't show you what chemicals were used in the treatment of the machinery before the food was processed a lot of times.
That's a
And
good
sometimes
point.
you have toxic chemicals used to clean metal or something.
And how do you completely get that off, especially for like food manufacturing, right?
You don't. I don't
can't.
think you
There's
really
no
can.
way.
You have residue. Justin, you were talking about the weapons manufacturers in the United States. I'm wondering, from your perspective as a weapons manufacturing company or head CEO, you're the executive.
Yeah.
Like, what are your thoughts on the military-industrial complex? Just because lately, I used to think I didn't know anything about them. Then 2007, I was like, they're the villains. Now I'm like, wait, we have the military-industrial complex in the United States. If it was in another country, we'd be living in the servitude of
We
that
would be their customer. I mean,
how do you find them as like an evil, unstoppable force, or what do you think about this thing?
Well, I think they've become that in many ways. It's a profit generating industry, and so in today's society where it's easy for them to say, well, we can just start another war, and that will be our development ground for where we make advancements and we test things. I mean, that's where we are today, but that's not where it was when we began, right? I mean, like I said, we developed this industry in the U.S. because we had to. We had to be able to make our own guns to defend a young, up and coming country, and so as it's developed over time, and we've post World War II, obviously the rest of the world is mostly in shambles. We're running strong. We were really the only country left that could produce much of anything. So we basically became the supplier to the rest of the world for advanced weaponry. So as power has become concentrated in those industries, I mean, the military-industrial complex is a real thing, and that's way over my purview in the sense that we're very detached from that. They're much larger than us. It's something that I can't even fathom. These are people that are connected with politicians, and they're making backroom deals, and they're writing the legislation. They're deciding where we're going to fight the next war, all of those things. So I think it's an unfortunate product of of reality. You know, when you have an industry that makes money off of the development of weapons technology, eventually somewhere along the line, you know, like the development of the nuclear bomb, so somebody looks at the atom and says, "Oh, we could make a bomb with this," and if that's the guy that gets all the money and all the funding, then we're going to make a bunch of bombs. And so, in the military-industrial complex, you have some guy in there at one point that says, "Hey, we could actually make a lot of money if we just started our own wars, right? Instead of waiting for the next war to happen and then figuring out which side we're going to supply." I mean, I think that's probably gone on forever.
It's like
people have been supplying both sides of every conflict going back.
Have you
forever,
seen Sherlock Holmes' Game of Shadows? Mm-mm. The movie plot is basically, spoiler alert for this 15-year-old movie or whatever. Moriarty he owns portions of all these different companies and manufacturers in different countries, and he wants a world war to start so that he can be the financier and have debt in all of these different places and own everything. And I guess the premise of the film is the industrialization of war, and they the first machine pistol, and he's like, whoa, it's like, what is this? And they're all shocked by it. And then at the end, Moriarty's like, war on the industrial level is coming. You can't stop it.
Yeah. Well, and naturally, technology typically has something that eclipses it, and that business dies away. But with the war industry, they just continue to up the ante, and if you give them a chance to test it,
bioweapons.
Yeah, and then we tell other countries, well, you can't develop your own. You know, whichever side you are on, you know, so Iran is trying to build a nuclear weapon, and we've decided that we can't allow that to happen. And so not only do we have these large companies here in the U.S. that are making all the weapons, but they're actively lobbying along with politicians to not allow that kind of weapons technology to be developed anywhere else. So, I mean, of course, it's going to be concentrated here because we won't allow that industry to grow. Imagine if, pick a country that we don't really like. You know, we're going to do everything that we can within our power. I mean, we really can't tell China what to do, but some country that we can actually exert influence over, we're going to do everything that we can to prevent them from growing a weapons industry because we don't want that to impact the companies that we've got here.
Yeah, which are five of the six largest are American. The sixth is British, and I look at it as a monopoly
for sure.
And you might laugh and be like, "Duh," but literally, what they've done is they've broken it into six companies that are technically different companies, but they're all American-British manufacturing. There's Raytheon, Lockheed Martin's the number one, then it's Boeing, Raytheon, BAE is the British one, then there's Northrop Grumman and General Dynamics.
What does BAE stand for?
BAE Systems.
BAE Systems is the company. I don't know what
it stands for off the top of my head. We'll find out. BAE.
Halliburton. Where you said Halliburton?
Halliburton's not in the top leading weapons manufacturers.
Halliburton's not really a weapons. They're more of a general contractor. They just
nation
they
build.
They nation build exactly.
Beyond that is Airbus, which is trans-European. Now we're starting to look at the non-British American alliances. There's Thales in France. It's only worth $9 billion. The American British ones are like $20 billion and up. So they constitute $140 billion. Probably like 95% of the weapons manufacturers on Earth, something like that, are American British. Then you get to Leonardo, which is Italian at $8.8 billion, and Almaz Antey and Russian $8.5 billion. That's the first Russian manufacturing. So yeah, I think that there is a monopoly on weapons manufacturing controlled by the British Empire, American industry being the weaponization arm of the British Empire. Mm-hmm. It's concerning. I don't know any way around it. I don't even know if it's the worst case scenario. I mean, it's better than the Chinese. I'm not a warmonger, but I understand the value of war and the necessity of it at times. So
and obviously those companies have developed a lot of this technology that have civilian uses and civilian purposes. And some of those things started off maybe with like a lot of the things that came out of DARPA have had, anything having to do with lasers, for example. Lasers have a lot of scientific research uses. They also have use for offensive weaponry. There's just no way around that. The internet, all of these things, a lot of them are products of weapons development and DARPA and the government investing in things, and you have some aspect that's going to be useful for civilian purposes, and then you're going to have some aspect that's going to be useful for military purposes.
Roads, that's another example. The Roman roadways was like the greatest military breakthrough of
way to
the
move
time.
Troops, exactly. Yeah.
How did you start your business? I'm just curious. You guys might know the origin story already.
Kind of happenstance, to be honest with you. So this was in 2015. I was working for an insurance company, and it was an insurance company that specialized in dealing with manufacturers. So everybody I dealt with around the Detroit area was in the manufacturing business of some kind, small tool and die shops, all the way up to big plastics manufacturing companies with 200 employees. That was kind of our niche market. And so I was looking to get out of that industry, and I had developed an affinity for what they did. I saw these guys that, they were building whatever, widgets, parts, and on the worst day of their lives, their wife could be divorcing them, they could be having the crappiest day possible, but they could look at the product that they made and be satisfied that they put their craftsmanship into it.
Yeah.
And so I was jealous of them in that way because, I'm selling insurance.
They had something
like,
tangible
who cares,
at the end of the
right?
day.
It's a book full of paper that you hope you never have to open because that's the worst day of your life probably, So my younger brother was working for a small ammunition reloading company at the time. And, this was like the tail end of the Obama presidency. So this was post Sandy Hook. There was a big boom in the firearms industry as a result. There was a lot of regulation that people were afraid of. The cost of ammunition was really high because the demand was very high. And again, at that time, the whole ammo industry was controlled by a small group of companies. Winchester, Remington, Federal,
Right.
These big players. So you had a lot of small companies starting to get into the business of making ammo because they saw a market for it. And so the guy who owned the company that he worked for passed away, and it was like a side business. He was like a rich guy, had a couple of other businesses. So my brother called me and said, "Hey, I think we can buy this equipment for not that much money. I know you're thinking about wanting to do something else. What do you think about this?" And so I thought about it for a while. We bought the equipment, and I wrote it was in April of 2015. So my background is finance and that type of thing. Yeah. So I wrote a business plan, and we put the pieces together. I tried to find some venture capital, some money to fund it, struck out on that, and basically decided I was going to cash in my retirement plan and kind of go all in. So we got up and running right before the 2016 election, or 2015, 2016 election.
Did you do that? Did you want to be ahead of an election year? Does that influence gun sales or ammo?
Well, it was sort of happenstance that we got everything lined up before the election. So we had a couple of months where it was a good run up because everybody knew Hillary was going to win.
Yeah.
And so the whole gun industry was kind of freaking out. She's going to ban everything.
I knew a lot of people who bought their first gun because they were afraid Hillary Clinton was going to
win. And I was a consumer in the gun industry post Sandy Hook. So I was doing that. I bought a $200 AR-15 lower receiver like a bunch of other people. Is that what determines commercial gun sales in America? Like pending regulations or pending political turmoil? Say that one more time.
Is that what sort of dictates, if people are going to suddenly buy a lot of guns? It's not like they're like, oh, it's Christmas time, we're going to buy everyone a gun.
It can be. I mean, it is seasonal as well. People buy stuff around the holidays, for sure. It's kind of a winter sport here in the Midwest as well. People shoot mostly at indoor shooting ranges, and so it tends to be a bit seasonal. But yeah, I mean, it definitely tracks with the political cycle. It does for sure. So we got up and running, and then obviously the election didn't go the way that people thought, and so there was a bit of a struggle for the first couple of years while we tried to figure out, the demand is dropping, so you can't just be the guy with the ammo that people are going to buy at any price. You have to find a niche, and so that got us into competitive shooting in particular. People that do training classes that are big consumers, high volume consumers, are willing to pay a little bit more for a premium product. So it was actually great for us in that sense. I mean, if Hillary would have won and we would have been able to just sell whatever because people would buy whatever,
it'd be a different business.
We wouldn't have been able to develop the brand the way that we have, and so I'm kind of thankful for that, I would say, in retrospect.
Let's jump into this next story we have from NBC. I see people are super chatting about this. U.S. Marshals Service suffers major security breach that compromises sensitive information, senior law enforcement officials say. The incident did not involve the database involving witness security program, blah, blah, blah. But they're going to say sensitive information. The affected system contains law enforcement sensitive info, including returns from legal process administrative information, personally identifiable information pertaining to subjects of USMS investigations, third parties, and certain USMS employees. Wade said the incident occurred February 17th when the Marshals Service discovered a ransomware and data exfiltration event affecting a standalone USMS system. It's got me thinking. In the event of war with China, you know what I think they're going to do? I think they're going to release everybody's private info.
You think China will, you say?
I mean, maybe China, somebody. But one of the most powerful cyber attacks you can do is not a nuclear. One of the most powerful acts of war would not be a surveillance balloon or even a bomb. It would be taking everybody's data and publishing it.
Yeah.
People would, we've talked about this before. A lot of people said that when the Soviet Union fell and like everyone's secret files got released, everyone just agreed to shut up and not bring it up because everybody had bad stuff in there.
Yeah.
But it's going to get crazy when some leftist teachers' DMs get released and they're saying a whole bunch of racial slurs. It's going to it's going to be nuts. So I was seeing this story and I'm just thinking about to what extent are some of these cyber attacks acts of war? Think about it okay, so maybe it's embarrassing if someone publishes your web browser history or something, right? But what if a foreign nation publishes all the criminal court proceedings and all the communications from investigators, just completely disrupting our legal system?
Especially if they weave in falsehoods within these huge dumps of truths. And then they could pick like specific little things where like a piece of data is slightly skewed to make someone look guilty or someone not look guilty.
I find myself imagining when you get those calls, it's like, we want to call you by your extended warranty. Like, what if they stole everyone's data, they leak it, and then you just bombard every communication system so there's no way to get actual information across? I know it sounds a little bit ridiculous, but if you made it so that no one wanted to pick up their phone, no one wanted to check their email, no one wanted to communicate with you at all, they couldn't trust that their identity hadn't been stolen, I mean, it would be chaotic.
But it's not about your identity being stolen. Those phone calls can serve two purposes. The first is my phone rings. I think I got like 7 scam calls today. It's like scam likely, just endless. And then I get voicemails that are just in Mandarin. I can't do anything with that. All it does is waste my time. But you have to think about it this way. You ever see the movie Office Space?
Yeah.
You guys seen
Such a
Office
good
Space?
movie.
And they're like, we were a program that takes fractions of a penny from these transactions. So over a long period of time, we'll make a bunch of money. China's probably looking at it in a similar way in terms of war. I'm not saying these phone calls are coming from the Chinese government, maybe. But think about it this way. If a phone call disrupts an individual worker in the United States by 0.0001% of their daily productivity, it means nothing to the individual. But as a collective, the entirety of the United States, that could be seriously damaging. Right. It could stack up to the point where all of that, it's like strapping a weight to the ankle of the American economy. They are slowing us down. The other thing is, if people actually answer the phone and it's calling about your extended warranty and they give in to these scams and give money away, now they're actually stealing resources they can then use in their war effort.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You shoot a $400,000 missile at a balloon and you wasted $400,000. But if you spend...
It wasn't way more than that? It was
per missile, I think.
Oh,
and
okay.
they shot 2, so it was $800,000 total. But
well, all right.
But yeah, you spend $800,000 on missiles, or you spend $800,000 putting together some algorithm, and what's your cost? Your
Knock
cost
out the internet.
is the data, basically.
Yeah.
That's your only cost, and it can just run in the background.
When the
and
U.S. has
disrupt whatever you want. Right?
When the U.S. has the internet knocked out, we all go, oh, geez, the internet's out. But how much economic activity is disrupted by that, slowing U.S. growth and allowing, and then China carries on as nothing happening.
This happened in Canada last year. There was a big internet outage. One of the telecommunication companies went down, and it was not just workers, but also bus systems, because all of the bus passes are hooked up to the internet, so you can't get anywhere. I mean, it went on for like the outage was, I think, 24, maybe over that, and the chaos that ensued, it took a long time. It took several weeks to recover from, because the city was just not prepared to lose the internet. And with China stealing and releasing data, in particular, it's challenging to think about because you just don't know how much data has been released and collected by China. I mean, I know we saw it was like 26 states now have specifically banned TikTok on government-issued devices and government networks, because part of TikTok's policies is that it collects not just information on your phone, but also your browsing history and on your keystrokes and all of these things. Like, if you had that but you were a government worker, and so you were on the DMV Wi-Fi, and so you have all of this information, and you've been looking up different things for people. Like, that's a lot of very sensitive data that's just sitting in this app's purview to swipe.
China, if you're listening, name your price for Eric Swalwell's browser history.
I think Fang was watching. Like they
Right?
were probably working on that together. You know what I mean?
Plus, like if someone's got, I think kind of along the lines of what you're saying, if someone's got TikTok on their phone and then they got my name and number and email address in their phone as a contact, now the CCP has my email address.
Well,
But
I mean,
it's something
number.
Facebook's already been doing. I mean, Facebook collects your browser. Like, if you have a Facebook Messenger open, it can read all your other tabs on your computer. So there's no way to put it back in the bottle.
wait. Facebook Messenger can read all the tabs on your browser?
It's
Really?
either Facebook or Facebook Messenger in their terms of service. They can, like, if you have it open, they can read the other stuff that's going on. They can collect the data.
I don't know about on a computer how that would work. On a phone, I would understand how that could work.
It's on any internet browser. I mean, I'm
Well,
not an
if-
expert, but this is something that I had been told.
I know
by
that
a
websites
security
all have the
person.
Facebook tracker, so Facebook knows where you are all the time. The scary thing about Facebook is the shadow profiles. You guys know about that?
Yeah, they build that based on the contacts in your phone.
Exactly.
And, all that other data.
All the data they collect from everywhere builds a profile on you, whether you want it or not.
Yeah,
Isn't it really funny? Wasn't the CIA working on some program, about tracking the life of every single person, and then they canceled the program, and then Facebook launched around the same
literally
time?
like the same time. Yeah.
This
Yeah, like
fun,
right
goofy guy.
Yeah, what was that called? I think the people in the chat will know that the CIA or something was working on some program called like Life Track or something like that, and they wanted to create profiles on everybody, and then all of a sudden they just canceled the program. Then Facebook starts. It's like somebody probably went to the boss and said, "Why are we going to do all this work tracking people when we can just convince them to do it for us?"
Yeah.
They'll beg us to post their photos and share.
Do you feel like we're on the defensive? They're saying there's a
LifeLog.
security breach.
It was
and
LifeLog,
LifeLog,
NSA LifeLog. Is that what it was called?
that's kind of crazy. You're a security guy. Do you feel like we're on the defensive with this? Like
DARPA
we are
LifeLog.
reacting to someone collecting our data as opposed to actively securing it?
Yeah, I think part of that's a product of when you got into the tech age. I mean, I'm 37, so I had a phone when I was 12, but I wasn't allowed to use it unless it was an emergency. And phone plans at that time had 500 texts a month, and so it was just a different age. But I'm kind of like a Bitcoin guy, and so there's a whole segment of the Bitcoin industry that's really into the security side of it. And so it just depends on how you started, right? Like people, once you start going down a path, you're unlikely to shift. So people who have started using technology before thinking about security as being something that they should think about are probably unlikely, or in some cases it's not even really possible for them to go all the way back to square one and build security from the ground up. Like if you're doing 10 things that are unsecure and then you decide, well, I'm going to start taking security seriously, well, it's probably already too late. Unless you're going to get a new phone number, you're going to completely get rid of anything that you used prior, and you're going to start from scratch. So I think your average person is just very unlikely to do that. So you have to think about, where does it make the most sense? Like, so for me, when I got into Bitcoin, I was kind of a neophyte in it at the very beginning. I was just paying attention to what was popular in the media. And then I actually went to a a conference called Guns and Bitcoin last year, and started talking. I mean, like, I was the dumbest guy in the room. Honestly, these guys were some of the smartest people I've ever been around. But it was funny how much we had in common with them, which was kind of the point of the conference. It was a lot about 3D printing guns and Bitcoin and self-sovereignty, and two different groups looking at the same problem from a different perspective. And so thinking about, okay, well, if you're going to have your own Bitcoin, like, well, are you really in control of it? Do you know your keys? Are you connected to your own node? Do you have a secure wallet? Like, so in that case, yeah, like I'm pretty confident that I've done the right things in that one area of my life. But are there a bunch of other ways that I'm probably deficient from a security perspective? Yeah,
Well,
probably,
and the majority of people, like you're saying, just
sure.
never think about
I mean,
that.
like in the gun community, a big thing has been, like, we know that Facebook and Instagram and the tech companies are developing ways to pull the serial number off of photos of guns. So if you take a photo of a gun and they can see the serial number, they are digitizing that just like you do, you know, character recognition, OCR. And so that's a big thing. That was a big thing for a while. You can't show your serial number on the internet because then they'll know that it's yours, and then they're going to build this shadow registry that supposedly they are not allowed to do, but we all know that they are. So like in my case, I mean, there's so many pictures of my guns out on the internet. Like, what can I do at that point? Now, going forward, I could make sure that I don't do that with anything that I don't want them to know that I have.
Yeah.
But once you've let that cat out of the bag, it's pretty hard to put it back in.
Let's talk about Scott Adams. Ladies and gentlemen, we have this tweet from Scott Adams. He says, "My publisher for non-Dilbert books has canceled my upcoming book and the entire backlist. Still no disagreement about my point of view. My book agent canceled me too." I'm not sure what he means by still no disagreement about his point of view, but here's the story, because there's a lot of people disagreeing with his point of view. This is from Hot Air, hundreds of newspapers canceled Dilbert comic strip, accuse Scott Adams of racism. There is some nuance to the conversation being had here that the media is overlooking in what Scott Adams said, albeit I disagree with what Scott Adams' prescription for the issue is. Rasmussen published this. Black Americans only. Quote, "It's okay to be white. 53% agree. 26% disagree. 21% not sure." That's kind of a crazy, scary number. That 26% of Black Americans think they disagree with the idea that it's okay to be white, and 21% aren't sure. That's kind of scary. Quote, "Black people can be racist too. 76% agree. 27% disagree, 8% not sure." So let me play for you what Scott Adams said, which resulted in his absolute cancellation. Dilbert's being canceled. His book is being canceled. He says his career is over. Here's what he said.
So if you know, nearly half of all blacks are not okay with,
Uh-oh.
according to this poll, not according to me, according to this poll, that's a hate group. That's a hate group. And I don't want to have anything to do with them. And I would say, you know, based on the current way things are going, the best advice I would give to white people is to get the hell away from black people. Just get the fuck away. Wherever you have to go, just get away. Because there's no fixing this.
This
can't be fixed. Right? This can't be fixed. You just have to escape. So that's what I did. I went to a neighborhood where, you know, I have a very low black population, because unfortunately there's a high correlation between the density. And this is according to Don Lemon, by the way. So here I'm just quoting Don Lemon when he notes that when he lived in a mostly black neighborhood, there were a bunch of problems that he didn't see in white neighborhoods. So even Don Lemon sees a big difference in your own quality of living based on where you live and who's there. So I think it makes no sense whatsoever as a white citizen of America to try to help black citizens anymore. It doesn't make sense. It's no longer a rational impulse. And so I'm gonna back off from being helpful to black America, because it doesn't seem like it pays off. Like, I've been doing it all my life, and the only outcome is I get called a racist. That's the only outcome. It makes no sense to help black Americans if you're white. It's over. Don't even think it's worth trying. Totally not trying. And there we go. You didn't expect that today, did you?
So I don't get what his point is. I mean, first of all, he's very, very wrong. He makes the point about Don Lemon saying, even in these neighborhoods, I'm like, yeah, Don Lemon did say that. Don Lemon did this thing in 2013 where he was like, if you live in the black community, stop littering, start doing these things. And then I just brought up, like, I don't know about these other cities. I know that in Chicago, in Hyde Park, which has double the black population on than the country's average, it's actually very wealthy and very nice, and has University of Chicago. And you walk around and everything is beautiful down there for the most part. And you go to other neighborhoods like where I grew up, and there's a bunch of scummy white trash white people with, you know, cars with no tires in the front of their house and trash like that. So I don't know. Maybe it's just me because I'm in the mix of it. I don't see that. I don't know what he's talking about. But now his book is canceled. His non-Dilbert books are canceled. His entire backlist. Here's what I think. When the left has psychotic racist opinions, nobody bats an eye, nobody gets canceled. The left can literally advocate for racial segregation, and they do, and they implement it all the time, and there's no repercussions. And then Scott Adams comes out and says he doesn't like this, so he's going to move, and he thinks other people should as well. And I'm like, I disagree with you, Scott Adams. I don't like stereotyping based on race. That doesn't solve the problem, and it doesn't actually get to the root of what is actually going on. Just because they polled this group of people doesn't actually answer any of the questions that we're trying to have answered. But that's fine. He's allowed to have his opinion. I'm just saying there's clearly leftist CRT-based racism, which is very, very similar in many ways. Well, I mean, it's literally just like old school white supremacy with a mask put on it, is totally acceptable and fine. I'm not Derek Bell, the critical race theorist who's pro-segregation. That's acceptable in these schools. Scott Adams, who says basically the same thing, but in a different way. That's really, really bad. I think it's all bad, but it's clearly a double standard.
I think he's been sort of on a slow cancellation anyways. Like, this is maybe the nail in his public coffin, but he got dropped by a big publisher who has like 70 newspapers earlier last year because he had this character who's black but identifies as white, and he was making some joke about like ESG scores, and got contacted by a publisher for like, I think it was 73 newspapers, and they're like, we're not going to run your comic anymore. I understand why this is like uncomfortable and shocking, and I don't think that he's right about the way he's interpreting all of this data. But I think that he has been sort of a growing target for cancel culture anyways.
You're right that about the way he's interpreting this data is wrong. He took a poll of 1,000 people, and then he said something about all of Americans and that people should run away from black people because of this 1,000-person poll that isn't even confirmed. I don't know if it's actually 72%.
Well, Rasmussen said that they poll online, so people elect to take it, and that it's nationwide. So theoretically, people come from a cross-section of society.
And theoretically, people could lie.
But people who
Yeah, of
answer
course.
a poll like that are the people who are going to answer a poll.
Yeah,
like that. I
it's-
mean, that's the problem that the gun industry has. The
And
same thing.
that's one of the problems
with.
with polling, right?
Yeah.
Like if you just put out one poll and you're like, and we've now decided, it's indicative of something, but you would need to do more research to really get to the bottom of it.
And he says in the beginning, just so you know, this is all based on this one poll. I'm basing my entire belief structure on this poll now. And he starts claiming things as if the poll is right.
But
And,
it
like,
is-
dude, Scott,
but it-
you brought it on yourself, man.
It is crazy that 26% of people would be like, no, it's not okay to be white.
It's not 26% of people, 26% of 1,000 people.
26%
Yeah,
of black respondents.
Yeah,
said-
which were they even black? I mean, can you prove it? I can't. I don't know any. This poll.
Your question of trust is not a question of the argument, Ian.
Well, he makes a definitive claim based on this unverifiable poll, and even if it is
and he
verified, it's
says-
1,000 people.
if this is true, that's what the poll says, then therefore.
Then he extrapolates. Then, therefore, the entire
So-
world
so
is
you-
that way,
so-
and we must make decisions based on.
Well,
Big mistake, Scott.
Ian, you're not actually answering what Hannah Claire was talking about.
In what way?
Hannah Claire was talking about how it's crazy that 26% of the respondents identifying this way said this thing. Now you can extrapolate whatever
She
you
said
want.
26% of people. That was why I
No,
responded.
it's
26% of black
26
people.
of black respondents said that they
Of the
think it's
1,000
not okay
respondents,
to be white. But
Is it 1,000? Did you actually
it's
check that?
1,000 for the whole poll.
Yeah, I thought it was like 130. I think that the 26%
Is a smaller
like
population.
130 total respondents.
Right.
If I remember.
So Scott made a broad, sweeping claim about society based on 130.
He actually said he moved away because of things like this, and I'm kind of like, yo, that's.
But that means he already did it. He didn't.
Right.
He's not saying I'm moving. He already left, right?
I've been of the belief that maybe Scott would come on the show one day. Like, he's been very vocal about critical race theory, and like he seems like he's got an awareness about things in society. But at the same time, I gotta say, Dilbert, I think, is one of the most boring cartoons ever made. I used to watch it in the 80s and 90s, or read it in the 90s in the paper, and it'd be like, oh, sure is hot out there today, huh? And Dilbert would be like, yeah. And he's drinking coffee. He's like, got donuts there? Yeah. And then that's the end of the comic. And you're like, what in the hell kind of dreary, boring ass shit?
I mean,
You don't want to have him on
I-
because this comic's boring?
I liked Dilbert because my dad is a software engineer, and he is like
It is 1,000
a
American
I mean, it
adults.
was just
Yeah.
it was very similar. I just hope the Calvin and Hobbes guy stays out of this whole discussion.
That's true.
I love
I'm
Calvin.
still-
Bill Watterson is just
I don't-
hiding.
I'm
Yeah.
still open,
Please don't get
Scott. If
Bill
you wanna
Watterson,
I don't know
don't
how
get
you guys
canceled.
feel about it. If Scott wants to come on, I don't know if you guys are even interested in talking to the guy, but I think,
I just like
I don't
more-
like seeing people get canceled in
Yeah.
general.
I just like more information, right? Like, I think the poll is sort of doing a disservice because there's no follow-up as far as we know. I mean, it's really easy to put some shocking stats on Twitter and to not dive into your point, right? It's only 1,000 people. We'd need more research to see intensely. It is strange that of 1,000 people, of the portion that are African-American, they would respond that like a quarter of them would say it's not okay to be white. That is unusual. It's not what I would expect.
It's unusual, but I think it suffers from the same problem that you have in, like I said, with gun topics. You'll get these polls that the anti-gun lobby puts out that says 90% of gun owners support universal background checks. And the question is always, okay, well, how did you phrase the question and who did you poll? I'm 100% confident that if I walked into my jiu-jitsu gym and I talked to every single black person who trains there, they would look at me like I was growing a second head if I asked them this question.
And
it's like if you go outside and touch grass, get out into the real world, get away from these polls, like stop letting these polls run your life. I can empathize with the fact that, like if that was really true, would your advice be valuable? I mean, maybe, but
well, see, and I would want to know.
Well, so
is that really the way to resolve that issue?
The polling data.
You're going to make it worse.
We have the polling data right here from Rasmussen, 1,000 Americans. The question they asked was, do you agree or disagree with this statement, quote, it's okay to be white? Now, I think one of the things that people need to understand here, especially Scott Adams, is the people who responded may have already seen the media campaign that claimed the phrase, it's okay to be white, was a racist dog whistle.
Right.
In which case that 26% may be like, I saw that in the news that the white supremacists were putting that stuff out there. So no, I don't agree with it.
Right. That's what,
Not
if I saw a poll that said,
idea.
"Is it okay to be black?" Like I would like I'm not going to answer these polls.
Right.
This is stupid.
Do you agree
This
with
is
Black Lives
ridiculous.
Matter? Could be a similar question. And you're like, I don't like the corporation, so I say no. But you do believe that Black Lives matter in
Sure.
general.
Exactly.
The question would be, do you believe in Black Lives, or do you believe Black Lives Matter? And that means two things. In the general sense, the proper, we could say the proper noun is, do you believe organization, quote, bracket, Black Lives Matter? And then the generic is, do you believe that Black lives in fact matter to other people? Like, because Black Lives Matter is an organization, that question means two different things to different people. Do you believe in, do you believe, do you support Black Lives Matter? Are you talking about the nonprofit or the general concept? We're not going to tell you, because then what we're going to do is, once we get the answer we want, and most people say yes, we then put out our answer saying, when surveyed, most respondents said they did support the organization Black Lives Matter.
And I would get, when I was doing a lot of administrative minds, I'd have to look at like, is this too hot for TV kind of stuff? And stuff would come in and say, it's okay to be white. And then it would show like this white woman with like long blonde hair in a field with like an Aryan race symbol on the picture. And it's like everything about that's legal. But I know what they're trying to say. Is it okay to be a white supremacist? It's okay to be white, and it's okay to just tell everyone I'm white, and it's great. Like, it's okay. And like, at some point, you got to stop being racist. It's not okay to be racist. Like, it doesn't matter what your skin color is at some point.
What does that mean? It's not okay to be racist? Like, clarify that.
Just being racist. I mean, I like talking about the difference in genetics of races and historiological, things like that. If that's considered racism, then I think that's an okay conversation. But if you're going to make your future choices based on what happened in the past, that's a mistake. Or based on what skin color people have, that's a mistake.
I think the issue is,
don't all kinds of people do that?
I think the problem is that we don't want to implement government based on race. We don't want to implement policy based on race. We don't want to give out loans or anything based on race. We want to judge people based on the content of their characters. If an individual holds a belief, I don't know if that's not okay or okay. Morality and ideas change. So if some guy's got really bad views and keeps them to himself, like, that's fine. You can believe whatever you want to believe. Just don't go around hurting people.
That's true. It's okay to hate. It's just not okay to act in violence based upon it.
But Scott Adams is getting he's not getting published anymore because he expressed his personal opinion on his own podcast. That's just cancel culture at that point, right? He's allowed to have an opinion that we don't agree with. Does that mean that his work, where that work is not being
canceled?
He didn't
Dilbert has nothing to do with this,
right? He didn't publish a poll where or a cartoon that has this poll quoted in it, right?
He did tell people to
Can you imagine Dilbert coming out and being like, "Hey, Dogbert, I recommend you." And he just goes off.
Yeah, he told.
That actually would be. I
believe his black white identifying character Adam is like, I've got to move because It's crazy out here.
He told people to segregate. I think that's the big problem of this video. It wasn't just him saying, this is how I feel. He was saying, if you're white, you should get away from black. Like, that's, to me, is insanity.
But it's his opinion, though. Like, should we cancel him over his opinion?
Well, his stuff was only on people's newspapers because their opinion was that it was good.
Right, but that didn't change the content of his work, right? Like, if you had someone who mows your lawn and he said to you, like, I love communism, it's awesome, like, maybe you'd let him go, but also maybe you'd be like, but you do a good job and you show up on time for work, so you can not agree with things that I believe in.
A recurring
honestly,
theme on the
though,
show is don't give them your money to people that hate you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Agreed. Don't fund bad things. So at this point, I'm kind of like, I don't know. If a guy came out and was like, I'm here to mow your lawn, but I'm also a hardcore communist and the money you give me
Yeah,
is
I'd probably
going to my
turn that
lawn.
down.
Yeah,
I mean,
have a nice day. Bye.
It's
Yeah.
hard for me to criticize because for a year and a half, we told people who voted for Biden that we literally didn't want their money. So with cancel culture is tough. I mean, you have to, I think a better way for him to phrase it would have been, look, if this poll is right and if 26% of people have an opinion of you that's obviously not going to change and is an untenable opinion, then maybe you should think about how you organize your life to avoid those kinds of people
Right.
who think poorly of you. Now, that's, you can take that for what you will. I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to move away from black people. It means that you don't want to be around people who think that you're a bad person. I mean, I don't want to be around people who think I'm a bad person either. I'm not going to hang out with people who, are critical of me being in the gun industry
Right.
and tell me that, your business is built on the backs of dead kids or whatever. I mean, I'm not going to have a beer with that guy.
Yeah.
But, there are plenty of people in my gym I train with who are Democrats and are on the liberal end of the spectrum, and but we get along. Like we can tease with each other, and we're friendly enough that we don't have to separate ourselves. But I think if you're going to do something like what Scott Adams did, like you better have all your ducks in a row because you are going to get canceled.
Well, he knew this.
You
He had
better
said
have
it
the
in advance.
infrastructure.
And that's why I said,
He had already said it in advance, and I think the issue is that he's almost right in that if you're talking about a group of people that outright say they don't think it's okay to be a certain race, like you don't want to live near those people if you're of that race. So if you take the racial context out, that Scott Adams said black people or white people or anything like that, and say, if 26% of a racial group said it is not okay for you to be that racial group, would you want to live by them? Imagine if it was the other way around. Imagine if the poll was white people asked, is it okay to be black? And a black guy said, you got to get away from these people. Well, the reality is they say it all the time. These activists, not all black people. Leftist activists say all the time, get away from white people, whiteness is bad. There was a guy who was editor-in-chief over at Fusion had his Twitter banner that said down with whiteness with a bunch of black fists. And I'm like, all of that stuff is widely acceptable in the corporate press. It's widely acceptable to these newspapers. ABC News, funded and a Disney corporation, Univision Corporation, was absolutely 100% okay with their editor-in-chief putting up a Twitter banner saying down with whiteness. Okay, so when Scott Adams comes out, forgive me if I roll my eyes a little bit and don't care that much that a guy has an opinion I don't agree with, because I am swimming in the psychotic racism of the left for a decade or longer.
Yeah. I think you're right. It just reminds me of the conversation that we've had about a national divorce, right? Whether or not we actually formally enter a war, culturally people are pulling away from each other because they feel as though they're being pitted against one another, which is ultimately extremely destructive. But you can't blame someone of any race if you're told this race hates you or this race is constantly oppressing you. Why would you want to live next to them, right? If you're fed that constantly, it's meant to keep you apart. I'm not surprised that Scott Adams, who seems extremely depressed in this video, is like, yeah, I don't want to be around someone of this race who apparently doesn't like me.
But what kind of short-sighted mind would look at a poll of 1,000 people? I don't even know if he knows that how many people were in the poll. Would look at a poll and then make a life decision about all people based off that. It's just a low-hanging mentality. That kind of mind does not belong in the
it doesn't
forefront.
sound like it's based off this one poll because he already has moved away. He said, you know what I mean? Like he is showing signs that this is confirmation of something he has already felt, and now you're just seeing it in hard numbers. Like if you have a feeling about something and then it gets confirmed in the data, even if the data is not the best source, it's hard not to then be like, okay, I made the right decision moving away, because he's talking about it in the past tense. I don't know. That's just my perspective on it. I think that he seems like this is confirming something that he is already upset about.
But it's like, what kind of data is he using to confirm his suspicions? Like it's 1,000. It's not good data.
But like I said, he's been slowly canceled for years and years and years. I mean, they've been
Yeah, they call the right calls him Clot Adams.
Was he all for the vaccine or something early
Super,
on?
Yeah, he
super
was.
heavily in favor.
Super.
So he gets canceled on both sides.
But I mean, I can respect him for at least speaking up as he believes.
has.
Because he's clearly, I wouldn't call the guy a grifter.
No.
He's just going at anybody he disagrees with and saying exactly what he thinks. Even when everyone's yelling at him, he's like, that's what I think.
When
Too bad.
in the very beginning of that video, he was like, the thing is, all blacks. The thing about blacks. He's not even like black people. Blacks. It's like a 1950s
Yeah, but he's
racist.
like whites too.
Yeah.
I think he calls them white. He might say whites later in the video. It says it once. Blacks. It's like a 1950s George McGovern racism speak.
Oh, come on.
You
I
don't
feel
call
like
people blacks.
I feel like
That's crazy.
you
They
feel
call him- what do
upset
you-
about him, so you're reading more into it. Like if I told you, oh yeah, this guy said this crazy thing, like you may not feel the same sort of vitriol. Like it seems like you have a specific antipathy and like
I don't. It's very rare that well-known people come out and tell me to segregate away from black people. It was freakish to hear this come out of a guy's mouth.
Really? But if a black person said to you, like, I don't like being around white people and I'm going to leave, would you be angry at them?
Yeah, I'd be also freaked out. That's crazy.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be nuts.
They do it. All people of, well, actually, except for white liberals who hate being around white people, every racial demographic self-segregates
I understand, like, you want to
To
be
an
around
extent,
what you're familiar with.
to an extent.
The
Like
familiar-
there's literally, so there are historical neighborhoods that were by policy created to be racially segregated, but for the most part these days it is all self-segregation.
I understand
in
wanting
cities.
to be around what you're familiar with, but to run away from someone is to me is absolutely just it's the antithesis of
Well, you gotta
humanity.
clarify,
It's
what do you mean,
disgusting.
run away
to
from
be like
someone?
it's not that I want to go where the people look like me. It's if someone's mentality is I want to get away from the people that don't look like me, then they're crazy. You can make your society the way you want it. It doesn't matter what
Why
people
is that
look like.
crazy?
I mean, it's just like they're afraid for no justifiable reason.
But
They're-
but what he's saying is they're saying they don't think it's okay to be the race that I have no choice but that I
Yeah,
am.
the problem he's running into is that what he's really getting at is he doesn't want to be around people who don't think
He should exist.
rationally or don't think that he should exist.
Yeah, they're questioning
But-
whether he should exist.
But you can't tell that from somebody based on their outward appearance. You have to have a conversation
Yeah.
with them and understand where they're coming from. Hey, do you think I should exist? I mean, like that's not just something that you're going to ask your
Remember
neighbor when
that-
you move in. So, he's taking it to the extreme and saying, well, because they're black, and that's something that I can visually see, then I'm going to decide to self-segregate from those people. When in reality, if you had a conversation with everybody on the street who was black, probably almost nobody would actually have that opinion. But he's unfortunately taking it to the extreme.
Remember
of
that,
not having the conversation.
that guy was being interviewed, and it was a guy and a woman, and the woman says, "Well, you don't understand because you're white," and he goes, "What?" He's like, "I'm black," and she's like, "You are?" And he's like, "Yes," and then she was like, "I didn't know," and she genuinely thought his opinion
that
was because he was a white guy.
David Webb.
Yeah.
He's a conservative talk show host. I
Yep,
remember
and she
that,
didn't
yeah.
know who he was, so she accused him of being a white guy, and he was like, "What?" It's like, what are you talking about? These people on the left, they live in a world where race is political viewpoint.
Right.
So if you have a conservative political viewpoint, that means you're white. But I mean it literally. That's what they call whiteness. They've now started saying like, Polish people aren't white, and I'm like, Luke Rutkowski has blonde hair and blue eyes. Well, it doesn't matter. He is not white. And I'm like, okay, you're basically just saying people I disagree with are white.
In Scott's defense, his behavior right now is a result of 5 years of racialization of people saying whiteness is evil, blackness is evil, whiteness is great, it's okay to be black, like all this crap, this identity crap. You get people like Scott, or things like that coming out of people like Scott's mouth.
That corporate companies profit off of. If you went to Target during February, they had all kinds of like black is beautiful like merch and stuff, which like is great if you're trying to make sure that like young black kids in America feel empowered, right? But also it does set a weird tone where you're saying like, let's talk about race constantly and constantly say, don't forget that white people did this bad thing. It's feeding critical race theory even when you want to avoid it, when you want to treat people to look beyond skin color.
Mm-hmm. You got Morgan Freeman, I think it could be someone else just came out and said, "Stop calling me a black man, call me a man."
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Sure.
Once you become successful, you realize I don't want the handouts, I don't want the easy money.
Not Don Lemon. Don Lemon went on TV like a year or two ago, and he said he wants everyone to see him as a black man.
It's such a problem.
He wants it to be his race.
The other, who else? Someone really dude from Training Day. What's his name? Denzel. Denzel just came out and said something similar. Like, just call me a dude. Like, don't call me a black dude. Just call me a dude, a man. I'm a guy. And when you attain success, you realize you kind of start to see past that, the skin color and all that crap, and you realize like the content of your character is really what makes you great. And so it's wonderful that people at that tier are able to speak out and claim that. That's the way. When you start looking at people as people, start calling Morgan Freeman a man and not even registering his color when you're talking to him, then you're not a racist. That's when you were actually out of it, I think.
I think people spend too much time worrying about if they're racist or not. I feel like you don't spend enough time getting to know the people around you. You're so obsessed with how your actions are perceived, right? Like, you should be more comfortable with your neighbors than how the internet's going to label you, right?
The crazy thing is how
sure.
Republicans have historically been the not caring as much about race. Like the first black member of Congress, I think, was Republican, obviously. Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. The Democratic Party has consistently done things that just cause massive damage to the black community and the black family, even to this day. And so, look, forgive me if I just think like the Democrats are substantially more. Well, I don't think Republicans are racist at all. I think everyone's got racism to a certain degree. You see it in those charts I was talking about where white liberals don't like white people. White conservatives have a slight in-group preference. Latinos have a slight in-group preference. That means like for the most part, a white person, a black person, a Latino person, they're not going to care about any of this stuff. They'll live next to you. They'll go to your barbecue. But there's a small percentage that prefer to be around their own race, and then white liberals, small percentage too, prefer not being around their own race or whatever. But yeah, I don't know, whatever.
That's what I've actually enjoyed. One of the things I've enjoyed the most about gun culture is how it's becoming much more of a melting pot. You know, I've been working with Maj Touré and Black Guns Matter basically from the beginning for like 5 years. He was the first person that I actually sponsored, and a ton of other things have come from there. And, you know, that's something that I recognized right away was there's just a certain amount, there's parts of culture that I'm never going to understand. And so I can't speak to the things that he can speak to. And so the more that you get to understand it, like, hey, we're all coalescing around the same thing, which is we believe that everybody has the right to self-defense. And you have some people that are going to focus like, yeah, you know, a lot of these gun laws are based on racism. 100% true. Now, they know much more about that topic than I do. So it's great for me to be around them and kind of learn their origin story and learn how they came to be part of you know, the self-defense culture and the gun rights movement. And so that to me is just a benefit. Like, that's the best part.
We went to XCal a couple weeks ago when Luke was still here. You ever hear of them? There, it's like it's a really fantastic shooting range in Virginia, and you know, we're in the range, and there's, you know, people of all different races. I see a couple black guys are shooting, and some Mexican guys. The guys right to our right are Arabic of some sort, and I was like, look at everybody coming together, laughing and smiling. And they watched you know, the full auto, and they're all laughing and smiling. And then one of the guys, he's like an Arabic accent. He's watching one of our people hanging out with us is firing a suppressed FN 57 or something like that, and he's like, "Oh, that's so cool." I'm like, "I know, yeah, it's really cool." And we're like high-fiving. See, that's where everybody comes together.
Yeah, it's culture building. I work with a guy runs a group called Guns for Everyone, and he's of Mexican descent. And one of his big things is that he prints his newsletter in Spanish. And his aim is to try to build gun culture in Mexico where it literally doesn't exist. I mean, you just can't get a gun there, so the culture doesn't exist, but he sees that as a gap that he can bridge. Like, that's his niche. That's where he can provide value that other people aren't. And it's only to the benefit of all of us.
I remember on Twitter, I love this one story. Someone tweeted something like, Tim Pool wants to give all the crazy right-wing nut jobs guns, but wants, you know, black people not to have them. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? I think every Black Panther should be marching down the street strapped with a, you know, sidearm and an AR-15 because it's their right to do so. And it was like some lefty Antifa guy, and he responded with based. And I'm like, why would you assume I think they shouldn't have guns? The what is it called? The NFAC, the Not Effing Around Coalition. Aside from those negligent
great
discharges,
name.
Yeah, I mean that's a big problem.
I think it's great they're marching around with guns.
Is
Good
it
for
brief?
them.
Oh, for sure. I have no problem with that.
But the negligent
the
discharge.
safety and
Is there a limit to the amount of guns you can carry legally at once?
No.
That's wild.
No.
So you could have like 30 pistols on you if you
Yeah,
could have
sure.
like 30 hands or something.
Yeah, constitutional carry in West Virginia. You could carry 2 Barrett M82s on your back. Very heavy. but
whatever you want to carry.
yeah, a good workout carrying those things.
Have
you
there
know,
been
on your back.
advancements in lightweight guns lately?
Yeah, I mean, polymer technology started in the 80s. The Glock was like the first brand to really start. Well, I actually, let me backtrack. The AR-15 and the M16 was the first weapon that really started to use polymers and plastics. So that was and that was in the mid 60s. But it took a while. There's a lot of tradition in the, people like steel and wood. They see it as real and what have you. So over time, now pretty much every handgun in the $500 to $700 range is going to have a polymer frame and a steel slide. So yeah, the advancement in technology, we're developing better polymers. We're starting to use more carbon fiber things to try to make barrels lighter. In particular, like with high precision rifles, the big problem is the barrels are very thick, and so there's a lot of material in the barrel, and they tend to be very front heavy. So what they're doing instead is using a steel liner with a carbon fiber outer wrap, and that will provide the stiffness and the accuracy without creating something that is too unwieldy.
What's
heavy.
that? It's a fully auto M321 or something like that. What is it? You know better than I would.
I'm not sure exactly.
Minigun. It's like a full auto. I saw a video. M3 something. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I mean, I know what a minigun is. I don't know.
There's just a video
exactly.
of some like super high powered full auto with tracer rounds, and it just legitimately looks like lasers. It looks like Star Wars laser blasters. Just ripping through a vehicle and tearing it to shreds.
Is it the M3 grease gun?
And usually,
I don't know.
no, that's old. And usually, when they load the belts
Someone will know.
with
Someone will tell
ammo,
me.
usually there's a tracer every like 4th or 5th round.
Right.
So when you see the tracer, know that there's like 5 or 6
Yep.
other rounds that you're not seeing behind it. So yeah, the fire rates are incredible on
M134,
on miniguns.
M3429. Maybe it's the M134. It was really fast.
What's the M stand for?
Just machine gun. I mean, it's like, it's just acronyms. Everything in government is acronyms. So like most of these weapons obviously were developed for military contracts, so they got to come up with a shorthand acronym for it somehow.
It indicates that it has been machined.
Well, every company is different, but in that case, the M might stand for machine
Yeah,
gun.
here, watch this video. I don't know if it's gonna be too loud or something.
Oh, I just saw this. What?
Yeah.
I thought that was a laser.
It looks like Star Wars laser blasts ripping through this car. This isn't the video I saw earlier, but it's a video that looks just
So that's got
M134.
6 or 8 barrels that are rotating, so it has incredible rates
The
of fire.
buzzing.
Yeah.
It looks like a video game.
Yeah, it's like laser. It's like plasma blasts in Star Wars or something.
Yeah, I mean, haven't you ever heard? That's the meme is BRRT, BRRRT, and that's the A-10 Warthog. They built an entire plane around a gun. They developed the gun first, and then they built a plane that they could put the gun into. Like that's the craziest thing.
What
I
gun
would
is
say.
that? The Warthog?
The A-10 Warthog is the plane. It was developed as a tank killer, and so they developed General Electric developed a autocannon, they call it, and so it's actually shooting a 30 millimeter round, which is enormous, and they're coming. I can't remember the rate of fire off the top of my head, but I think it'll deplete the entire ammunition in something like 20. It only has like 20 or 30 seconds of sustained fire.
Wow.
And it's tens of thousands of rounds.
This is the
So they
A10
just-
Thunderbolt 2.
Exactly,
the
yeah.
one.
So they just zoom in and they fire for only maybe half a second, but that's 300-400 rounds, maybe
When was
more.
this built?
I don't know exactly when it was developed.
It started in
Probably the
1976.
70s. Yeah, the 70s.
man.
So it was developed as a tank killer. So it's shooting a 30 millimeter round, depleted uranium typically, and so they're just zipping right through. They fly in low, they zip through the tanks, and then they fly out.
That's crazy.
Depleted uranium, nuclear weapons, by the way. That's
Yeah.
nuclear.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to go to Super Chat. So if you haven't already, would you kindly smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, Share the show with your friends and become a member at timcast.com. We're going to have that live members only portion of the show going up around 10:10 on the front page of the website. You will see it live, members only. And then after that wraps, it stays in the archive forever so you can watch it. But smash that like button and we'll read what you guys have to say. I'm Not Your Buddy Guy says, it's a very black pill when you realize the only question is who will be running a technocratic enslavement with a social credit system, China or the U.S.?
I think Ian should run it. I feel like it'd be nice. It'd be good.
No, I think it would be very brutal.
Yeah, it would be at first, but that's only because I'm freeing the system so that you can run it yourself.
Yeah.
All right, Rook0613 says, I just wanted to say that Scott Adams isn't wrong on any level. With the rise of BLM, I agree. White people avoiding black people makes perfect sense, except when you realize that Black Lives Matter is the activist level, mostly white. Literally is. It's a whole bunch of white people marching around burning down black neighborhoods. So, well, I guess maybe then what they're saying is true. Those white racist Antifa people should avoid the black neighborhoods they're causing damage to. All right, let's see. Ready to Rumble says, Tim ran away from black people in Chicago. What do you mean? No, I didn't. When did I do that? I've only ever been mugged by a white guy. Like literally had two white guys. And it was funny. The story is I was in Lincoln Park, I think. And two white guys, one guy was trailing, they did it for security. And then a tall white guy tried mugging me. And then it turned out they lived like, I don't know, 5 or 6 blocks away from where I lived because they go to other neighborhoods to rob people. The criminals do. You know,
maybe because you left the city, you were running away. But I think you're an example of someone that goes where you want as opposed to flees from what they don't like.
Also, should you stay somewhere to
I ran
prove
away
that
from
you're
the
tolerant?
white. I ran from white leftists. It's like Tucker Carlson got accused of being racist, and he's like, "What? That's ridiculous. It's white liberal women I'm complaining about."
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? The problem with people who are mad about a race is it's like, why is the race the issue when there are clear examples of people of that race who are some of the smartest and best people in the freedom movement? I don't understand why the race is the component.
It's
the communism is the component.
It's divide and conquer, man. That's
Right.
Hegelian dialectic crap. It's Communist Manifesto.
Yeah,
They
communism
want you
is bad.
to be at odds.
You know? So like, if there is a black guy who's a communist, I'm not going to be like, it's a black guy. I'm going to say, it's a communist.
Communist.
If there's a black guy who's pro-2A and conservative, and he's got an American flag, and he's waving it with sunglasses on, I'd be like, that's a based MF.
You know, and if you're feeling racist, just stare at eyeballs. Spend the next couple of years staring at eyeballs. Look at people, look at their eyeballs. You realize we're brainstem creatures. The skin came afterwards. We're all basically the same kind of unit.
All right, where are we at? What is this? James Arenson says, to counter your poll, would you support a chemical weapon against China if it was kept secret? Interesting question. My answer is no.
Yeah, chemical weapons. That's a really bad idea.
Yeah.
I'm going to say no on that.
I'm Not Your Buddy Guy says, I'd go to war with China if it guaranteed an end to World Economic Forum ideas.
It does not guarantee that, though.
It'll probably make it worse, to be honest with you.
Yeah, they'll use the violence as an excuse to implement more harsh lockdowns, and then most people will be too passive to do anything about it.
If you don't have one world power instead of 2 world powers, then
And you have to think critically. Like, if they say it'll end whatever, don't believe them. It's not a guarantee. I think that's the problem with war. We have all these false promises of what it'll do, and they're mostly wrong. And there's no way they could deliver them.
Yeah, World War I, they were like, it's going to be over by Christmas. That was a big part of going to war for the British. And then, 4 years later.
Elahad says, war doesn't determine who's right, only who's left. Ooh. Yep. Raymond G. Stanley Jr. says, Tim, I say no to war. Maybe China did release the virus, but it was the U.S. government and Democrats that instituted lockdowns, mandates, and hate for us. There you go. Maureen McKay says, Ukraine war, no poll. I mean, I don't think anybody supports going to war in Ukraine, except for like BlackRock.
What do you think we do first? Go to war in Ukraine versus Russia, or go to war in China?
We're in war in Ukraine.
But like, do you think we'll focus there, or do you think we would wait until that conflict resolves and then go to war with China?
I don't see how I don't see how we can do
Two
Ukraine,
fronts?
to be honest with you. So I don't see how we could do 2. I mean, they're already talking about huge shortages in the availability of things like weapons in particular. I mean, like ammunition. Right now it's large caliber, but small caliber is being affected too. I'm already hearing about European primer manufacturers that are starting to hold back their supply because they know that there's money to be made in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Colt Zipriani says, my girlfriend was adamant that she never wanted kids until the day she got off birth control. Now she is begging for them. Interesting what messing with a person's hormones can do to their thoughts.
Birth control's poison. You shouldn't take it.
Yeah.
Well, there are certain circumstances where it actually is medication for people who have like hormonal problems. But like the idea of the mass medication of a society where they're just like take a drug for no reason without any real reason.
And I know that there are a lot of teen girls who are told, oh yeah, you should take it. You've got hormonal issues. Your hormones haven't leveled out, and they put you on birth control. But the issue is then you never address the hormonal issue, right? Taking birth control doesn't reset your hormones. When you come off birth control, you still have issues. I think the problem is that people go on birth control and don't think about the alternative of exploring, because it's simpler for gynecologists to prescribe birth control than to do a lot of testing.
I'm saying that birth control is a literal medication that doctors overprescribe. There are certain circumstances where any medication can be properly prescribed.
Sure.
But what we're seeing now a lot of is like 16-year-old girls go to the doctor and they're like, why don't you go on birth control for no reason?
Mm-hmm. Well, and then
like, okay,
it's years and years later when there are consequences, right? That's the thing about birth
But
control.
It's treated like aspirin or Tylenol or something when you're
And you're
playing
not-
with brain chemistry.
and
there
you're
are
not
people who have
told the
permanent
issues.
hormonal problems because of,
all kinds of things.
like ovarian damage. There's I'm not going to get into specifics of certain, medical problems, but there's like cystic stuff.
Yeah.
And you have to be on it forever.
Yeah,
But then there are like the majority of what we're seeing is just like every single person is being told to go on hormonal drugs.
Yeah, there's always a case for medication, but I just think that we aren't talking about the consequences. If it's the right choice for your body, you should be able to know why, not just that this is the easiest solution, that you'll avoid, more minor inconveniences that perhaps your doctor should explore more seriously with you.
TechRoo 2024 says China admitted it was an accidental lab leak when they suggested someone caught it from something they ate. Saving face is an element of Chinese culture where they admit they screwed up by making a lame excuse, and everyone is expected to shake their head sadly and drop the subject. Like with Fukushima, when they kept saying, everything's fine, don't worry, and the disaster was getting worse and worse and worse. And then, in the US, we're really frustrated, like, just admit it's not so we can fix it. But they have honor culture, so they have to keep saying everything's fine even when it's not. Yep. Yeah, well, this is what happens. Comrade Nikolai says, hello, everyone. What I think would be better is rally our allies together and force China to cancel our national debt. That's a reasonable deal when you consider our hundreds of dead grandparents in the lockdowns. Ooh, they would be really upset about that. Jeremy Hernan says, Second Amendment for the whole world, says the ammo salesman, LOL.
That's me.
Good for business.
I'd like to think I'm more than that, but
Did you say before you don't sell to the military, you don't sell to cops?
correct.
Do you mean like you don't sell to their departments,
So
or like
we-
if an individual
yeah,
cop walked in off duty and wanted a gun?
We have no problem selling to individual police officers, but we stopped selling to police departments. And the reason for that is the Novi Police Department came into my business and wrote a report that resulted in us getting fined by the health department for not wearing masks in our own building during the COVID craziness. Mm-hmm. And at that minute, I just said, I'm done with this. It's obvious. If it wasn't obvious before, it's obvious to me now, and it should be obvious to all gun owners that collectively as again, not to like put labels on groups, but I try to live my life by like the 80-20 rule. Mm-hmm. So the bottom line is 80% of police officers are there to work a job. And so whether it's enforcing mask mandates or enforcing gun confiscation, probably 80% of people are going to just do what their boss tells them to do. And I just found that to be an untenable situation. And so, it wasn't a big part of our sales anyway. Maybe it was 10% at the time, but I could see the shift. And I'll be honest with you, most of the individual police officers I work with agree with me on it 100%. So,
all right. Alaska Pants says Liberia failed, right? And wasn't it some kind of version of the U.S. Republic which was artificially installed? Yes. It was also surrounded by a bunch of non-U.S. Republic-based countries which immediately started destroying and exploiting it. You can't... solving a problem of, crime and these issues that like Liberia faced is... You've got an entire continent of warring tribes and different factions. It is a massive amount of power and influence over specific areas that you can't just come in and set like a small colony and be like, okay, you're good. We gave you the documents. because it takes only like a couple decades for outside influences to come in and start ripping apart those resources. So it's difficult, to say the least. You know, I'm not going to pretend to have all of the answers, but there are, you know, there's funny memes about like roads in Kenya. Everything's beautiful. The streets are beautiful. There's like some of the most prominent tech development centers there. I think it's called the iHub. It's been a long time since I talked to people from there. So you can take the best part of like Liberia and then compare it to like the worst part of America and make America look really, really bad. The real question is function of government, corruption levels, crime levels, you know, in the bigger picture, which is ultimately where polls do come in. We are trying to extrapolate data from, you can't literally ask every single person in the country. It's impossible. So we do our best to try and figure out what is causing these problems. And I think the answer is, well, the one thing I find funny about people who, you know, would say that race plays a huge component in all of this, as opposed to like ideology. I'm wondering why it is that it is predominantly white Europeans that are opening up their borders and allowing people literally to walk into their country and just start, you know, causing the problems these people are claiming, right? So in Japan's outright like closed borders, hard immigration.
Very homogenous culture.
And then it turns out to be mostly white people who are like, we're multicultural and everyone can come here and do whatever they want. And then it's other white people complaining about the fact that white people are doing it. And I'm like, does that mean that white people have a very serious submission problem and they're very a weak and ineffectual people, incapable of defending themselves? No, that's ridiculous. It means there's a corrupt political ideology of communism that's destroying things. I don't blame white people for the white liberals. I blame white liberals. All right. Here we go. I'm Not Your Buddy Guy says Will Ferrell as George Bush was funnier for opening. Yeah, Woody Harrelson's opening was like rambly and like it wasn't that good until he made that political point that was kind of funny, you know?
I don't know if I said this before, but he did play Biden on several SNL sketches. So I find it ironic that he's the one who's now like making this point about the cartels and drugs. Like there's something there.
All right. Yeah, but Trump says, Tim, you missed something about South Korea surgeries. It's actually weird if you don't have surgery of some sort. It's the current plastic surgical place in the world. Yeah, it's kind of crazy that North Korea goes, you know, starvation, hardcore, like authoritarian, and then South Korea goes full on capitalist plastic surgery for everybody. Mm-hmm. It's like an experiment almost.
And it's not just plastic surgery. They're one of the top beauty industries. So any kind of treatment that you want for your skin or for your hair or whatever else, South Korea is a leader in that field. So they are now if you know anyone who does like K-beauty, they get special moisturizer or else. Like they're exporting this industry that they have cultivated and developed to everywhere else in the world.
Is it technocratic in that are they like turned into cyborgs more there than other countries?
I don't know.
I wonder what their implant statuses are like.
Yeah, that's a good question though. I think that when it comes to like Neuralink, there's going to be some countries like I bet China Neuralinks in 2 seconds.
Oh my gosh, with the government.
Yep. Right. They're going to be like, your social credit score drops by 300 points unless you get Neuralink, and they're all going to go, okay.
And it's for your good, because when we change a law, you'll know right away what got changed. You'll know what laws not to break.
You won't be able to break the law. If you ever try to, your hands and body will become your body becomes paralyzed.
And you will be collected. Right. Yes. Yep. Your body will be collected.
You'll be like, some guy will get really angry and he'll be walking up to you and he'll be like, you kicked my dog. And then he'll raise a fist and then just freeze in place.
And dudes in white jumpsuits will get out of the van and pull him in, put him in the van and drive off.
No, they don't need to. He'll
just walk himself to the
There'll just be
facility.
frozen people all on the sidewalk. Right?
People who are on the verge of, a guy's about to like throw a wrap around the ground and he just stops and freezes.
They're timeouts
and
until you calm down.
Yeah, like you freeze for like 10 seconds and then they stop and they hold it and they look around and they walk over to the garbage and put it in. On the TV, a big thing appears showing your picture and being like tried to litter.
You could get people to drop to their knees. That's an easy thing to do to their brain.
Yeah.
And then just to face the Imperial Palace on their knees and just bow like this.
Yeah, I would worry that like
pre-crime.
The guy
Wasn't
who
that a
like
movie?
tries
Wasn't
to
that
litter is
Minority
like feeling
Report.
pain, right? Like through your Neuralink to like get you to stop doing it. Like,
They'll
like a shock collar.
I can't remember who was
Yeah.
saying this, but they said what the real scary thing is that, and I think it was Phil, maybe it was Phil saying this, that when you get Neuralink, it'll do the tiniest bit of dopamine when you do something they want, and it'll give you a negative reaction, tiny bit. And so over time, it just feels good doing what the machine tells you to do.
But then there'll be
basically,
situations.
you'll be exactly what social media apps do.
No one
but
needs to
embedded in
tell
your
you.
brain.
No one will need to tell you not to litter. you'll just start doing it because you'll get a dopamine hit every time you throw your garbage in the garbage can.
And then there'll be situations where you're supposed to litter, like rarely, like whatever, you're under command to do it or something, and it'll hurt. And you'll be like, why? Or what? You'll try to throw in the trash, but it'll hurt this time, and you'll be, why is the thing that feels good hurting? I'm confused.
Or what if you get like roving bands of people who really want another dopamine hit, so they're constantly finding places to clean up.
Yep.
So they can get like 100 hits and then like clean up litter.
That'll
that way.
happen. That's legit what's going to be.
That's
There's
crazy.
going to be people like pulling dirt out of the ground and throwing it in garbage cans because their Neuralink breaks and they're getting a dopamine hit from picking it up because their brain thinks this is garbage.
Something's going in the trash. Yeah.
There's going to be groups of people who are going to be like scratching and getting that high, and they're going to be like, I need that hit, man. And the government's going to be like, we need this house built. And they're going to be like, I'll build it. And as they're building, like, it feels so good to build. Oh, man, just doing the work for free. Yeah, it's going to be
This is
creepy,
terrifying. I don't like this at all.
dude. Get the Neuralink. It'll feel good.
Yeah, dopamine's free, like fresh water and air.
But it'll feel good. What's the
maintain.
problem?
Right.
You will be, think about this. What's better for somebody? Sleeping on the streets of LA covered in, garbage and doing drugs and then dying, or that person building houses and doing construction
true.
and getting the same high.
Getting up at 5, right.
Dopamine's not free because you need to eat. So you do need to acquire and consume to get dopamine. So if you could do it in other ways, that'd be terrifying.
Probot says Scott was right. Not all lions attack humans, but if you see a pack of them, you avoid them. You don't stop to see which are tame. That's funny because Daryl Davis pointed out that most serial killers tend to be white.
And
Name
also,
a black serial killer. Does that mean if you see a white person, assume they're a serial killer?
And also, don't compare humans to wild animals did. That's the step towards what Hitler did. Don't do that.
That meme about not all lions attack originated, I'm pretty sure, with feminists who said not all M&Ms are. If you have a bowl of M&Ms and 10 of them are poisoned, not all M&Ms, right? Take a handful. Why don't you? And it's just like, that's the stupidest idea ever. Like, feminists were doing the not all men thing, and they were like, when people were saying not all men are bad, they were like 10%, 10 of the Skittles are poisoned. Will you take a handful? That's right, not all men. That's what we're saying. And it's like that meme has been used to justify pretty much everything, of blaming everybody other than their garbage ideology. I'll put it this way. If I saw, you talk about lions, right? Lions, not all lions attack humans. If I saw a group of black dudes waving Proud Boys flags and wearing the Proud Boys shirts, I would, and then I saw on the other side a bunch of people with Antifa flags, I would choose the side with the black people.
For sure.
Because the ideology is the real issue. If I was walking down the street in Chicago and I saw a bunch of black men wearing nice business suits and carrying briefcases and talking on their cell phones, I'd be like, whatever. And then if I saw a bunch of white dudes with guns, baggy pants, and like prison tattoos or something, I'd probably be like, well, I know it. Honestly, I'd probably just walk past them, whatever. But like, which one are you going to make a negative assumption about? It's not the race that's the issue. It's if a dude's waving a Gadsden flag, I don't care what his race is. I'm like, oh, based, Gadsden flag. If he's flying an Antifa flag, I don't care what his race is. He's a communist.
I think it only matters that, like, fundamentally you don't want to live next to someone who thinks that your existence is bad. And that's true across all races, right? And so if Scout Adams' solution is to move away, like, fine, have a good time. If my solution is to get to know my neighbors and know them on a better level, then, like, also acceptable.
But if I had a neighbor that thought I was bad, I would rather engage with them and get to know them and override that preconception than
But what
to
if you
flee.
can't? What if they just always think you're bad because of something you have no...
I've never had that experience in my life.
But what if you do? What if they just
I'll
hate
let you
for
know
no reason?
If it happens, I'll let you know. But I've never had that happen.
I don't think that you should have to move, but like this is the thing that Scott Adams is coming up against, right? Like if he doesn't want to have to figure out which 1 in 4 of these people think that he is fundamentally not acceptable the way he is, then yeah, okay, move.
He's
but
deciding not to engage.
That's
Yeah.
cowardice.
Breton maybe says watch Scott Adams' podcast from this past week and his interview with Hotep Jesus before weighing in on this one. Scott knew this would happen before he made the statements in question.
I 100% believe that.
He did. He made statements about it. People had tweeted about it. He said he knew it'd be canceled. He knew this would happen. He was going to say it or whatever. Yeah.
And his stuff is coming out of publication, but it's still available online. He still has his podcast and stuff. I mean, that's what I think people who know they're going to get canceled end up doing. They just build offshore places to go to.
Brado Jacko says, bring on Scott Adams and Officer Tatum to discuss.
I would love to.
Cool.
I actually think that would be a better thing for the Culture War podcast, where it's like a long form conversation specifically on this one issue as opposed to like topical news of the night.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yep.
Fantastic. Scott, yeah, do that. And then stick around for a Friday night IRL if you do that, too.
Yeah. It's cool that you have like 2 different ways to do that now because not everyone is, You can talk about the news, but not everyone is in that format.
Right.
Yep. All right. Let's see what we got. Where are we at? Mr. Grizzly Bear says Ian doesn't seem to understand how polls are supposed to work. Yes, Mr. Grizzly Bear. I try explaining to him every single time we talk about polls, but I don't think he cares.
I know how media manipulation is supposed to work. Now I'm.
You see, now he's playing a semantic game to try and argue against what we're actually talking about.
They create classes to brainwash people into thinking that when they say that it works, what do you mean? Because when people say that vaccines work, what do you mean? Does that mean that they stop the spread? Or does that mean that they're just doing what they're supposed to do? Working is a very strange term. So yeah, the polls lay out info in the way that the poll is built to lay out the info.
For sure.
But is that value extrapolatable to the masses? That's my argument is no.
I agree. I mean, if you're polling an objective data point, how many people own a red car, right?
Right.
But when you're doing like qualitative, how do you feel about white people? How do you feel about black people? I think that's where it gets sticky. That's where data can be easily manipulated by starting with an answer in mind and then developing questions.
Or going to a specific group of people,
correct,
right? If you poll a
going
bunch
to the
of people,
respondents that you know
if
are
you
gonna
go
answer
to
the
the
poll
like
the way
county
that you
meetup
answer.
of red cars and everyone's like, yes, we have a red car, and you conclude everyone in America has a red car, obviously that's a terrible base set of data.
The Real Hydro says, I have a clip of Ian saying that when he was in food service, he said that when people of color came in to eat, he never expected them to tip because they are poor.
Oh, I saw that super chat. People would tell me that to expect them not to tip. And so I would think you're racist, and I don't care if they tip me or not. I'm giving them the same quality of service, and that's what I would do. And there would be times that I would get low tips from large families of black people. And there would be times I would get low tips from large crowds of white people. And I never stopped giving my best service. Pull up the thing and tweet it out if you really believe I said something like that. Because if I did, I want to acknowledge it.
All right, we'll see it on Twitter if you said it. American Gun Chick says 98% of gun manufacturers and companies only care enough about 2A to keep themselves in business. All talk, little action. Phoenix Ammo is one of the good guys in the fight. Thanks for being so supportive of the 2A community.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I would say most gun companies are part of that, military industrial complex in the sense that their customers are really government and law enforcement. And so for us, our customer base is 100% individual U.S. citizens, the people who the Second Amendment was written for. And that's the big difference. That's what we've always tried to keep in mind.
All right, let's see. Peace in Valhalla says, Tim, you understand that genders have tendencies. For example, women vote a certain way, but when it comes to race, Scott Adams is crazy. Women vote a certain way unless they're married. They vote a different way. It's almost like the environmental factors play a larger role on their politics. That's the point I'm making. So I said earlier in my video on Scott Adams, I do believe that there's a combination of nature versus nurture. And the people who tried arguing that race plays no role in physical characteristics, they're just wrong. But I believe that nurture plays an outsized role. Society will have a bigger role on whether a person behaves or does certain things as opposed to the family or genetics that they have in the long run. I think what I'm trying to say is humans of all different races are substantially more similar in that social functions will have a larger impact on them regardless of their race. That being said, people in Sweden tend to be taller than people in Thailand. That's literal reality. That's going to have an impact on whether or not people in Thailand can play professional basketball in the United States versus people from Sweden, because people in Sweden are more likely because they're much taller. And then you actually have in the United States, I think, what is it like? What is the percentage of the NBA that's black? It's like 70-something%.
I'll check it out.
For whatever reason,
It's definitely a majority, if not a super majority.
I mean, there is a racial correlation for whatever reason. That is a fact. I am not discounting the fact that people with different genetics will have different things about them. It is what
according
it is.
to Alexa Answers, Alexa Stop, .amazon.com, it's 74%.
74. What did I say? 70%?
Yeah, something.
I was close.
74.
I was thinking it was 74, but I was like, I didn't know for sure.
That was in
What are the
2015.
other groupings?
23.3% white, 1.8% Latino, and 0.2% Asian. But that was 8 years ago.
But there was these two scientists, man and a woman, and he believed that intelligence could be like trained and ingrained in a person. And so then he writes a letter to this woman. This is a story read on the internet. Maybe it's not true. He writes a letter to this woman and he's like, hey, I'm pretty confident I can raise children to be genius level intellect. So they have kids and then all of their daughters are like chess grandmasters, like champions or whatever. And then someone said, yeah, but you need to raise other people's kids and other races. And he's like, I'm an old man. I'm not doing that. Because people were arguing, they're your kids and you're a genius, therefore your kids are geniuses. And I'm kind of like, I don't know, man. I think if you take a Nobel Prize winner, his newborn baby, and drop him off in Somalia, he's going to end up not being too like healthy. He'll be more likely to be malnourished. There's civil war, there's conflict, there's crisis. You put him in a very wealthy, pristine area where he's getting access to nutrients and food and all the best education, and he's going to. That's going to have a bigger impact on anything else.
Nutrition. So key.
Nutrition, I think, is the number one thing. That if you take any person of any racial background and you give them garbage food to eat, plastics and other nasty trash, they will not function properly.
It affects the development of your brain.
And everything else, your muscles, your height. Like, it's just obvious. Come on. Take a 12-year-old kid and stop feeding him, and then he's going to be short for the rest of his life. Mm-hmm. That's North Korea. In North Korea, they're all shorter because they don't have enough food. Their bodies literally can't grow.
Girls with serious anorexia show signs of like cognitive deterioration because they're starving themselves.
Yeah. Does that cycle then into more anorexia?
It creates more anxiety and different things like that, but it's ultimately extremely dangerous.
Yo, this is cool. Brew Crew says, with the A10, you can only shoot it for a maximum of like 3 seconds. Otherwise, the recoil drops the airspeed too much to sustain lift.
Yeah. The amount of recoil is so much that it affects they had to calibrate that into the computers that control the flight hardware.
Otherwise, it would just fall.
And it affects how the
unless they fire
handles.
backwards.
Yeah, that's right.
They got to fire from the back, then it'll go faster. That's actually really cool. The plane is no propellers. It's actually a minigun in the back that uses recoil to fly.
Constant fire.
Recoil to fly. That's a ridiculous way to do it. All right, we'll grab one more here. What do we got? Probot says, my point was about inner city culture more than race. But until minorities stop their racism, I don't care. The left keeps using our morals against us. I'm ready to get into the mud. Yep, my point is about inner city culture more than race. I can tell you this, man. Where I grew up, culture more than race on everything. Gang members came in all different sizes and colors. So it really was about the culture that was around everybody. So with that being said, would you kindly smash the like button, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends, and become a member over at timcast.com. Go to timcast.com, click join us. And in about 10 minutes on the front page, you will see the uncensored live version of the show popping up. I don't think we have the chat stuff set up just yet, but there will be a live chat system soon. For the time being, it's just our typical members-only show, not family-friendly, uncensored conversations, and we'll carry on the conversation from there. So smash that like button. Again, you can follow the show at Timcast IRL. You can follow me personally at Timcast. And I strongly encourage you to check out the Culture War podcast with Tim Pool on Apple and Spotify and all podcast platforms. First episode was Friday. I sat down with Ali London. He is a British man who lived in Seoul, Korea, and was a transgender Korean woman and actually got the surgeries and everything. And recently, within the past 6 or so months, started detransitioning and talking about identity issues and crisis and what's happening. We're going to have a musician on affected by COVID mandates. We've got some other large cultural personalities, celebrities, and political figures that are going to be joining the Culture War podcast Fridays at 1 p.m. At youtube.com/Timcast. And I'll leave it there. Justin, do you want to shout anything out?
Thanks for having me. One thing I want to say real quick is we are trying to raise money for Firearms Policy Coalition to fight a lot of these anti-gun laws that they're trying to pass here in Michigan as well as around the country. So if you guys want to head to our website, phoenixammo.com, we have these gun-free zone stickers. $5 from every one of these stickers is going to go directly to Firearms Policy Coalition. It reads, gun-free zone, you are entering an unprotected environment. In the event of an active shooter, you are on your own. We feel like this is what gun-free zone signs should actually look like because that's the reality of what you're walking into. So we're encouraging people to stick these wherever they think they should stick them. And
Legally.
yeah, legally, of course. So that's it.
That's Fenix,
Yep,
F-E-N-I-X.
Fenix ammo.com. It's also Fenix Ammunition. Twitter still blocks our main URL, phoenixammo.com. So you can type the long one, phoenixammunition.com, same place.
And you're on Twitter or anything like that?
Yeah, we're on Twitter at Fenix Ammunition. That's where you can find us.
Cool. I'm Hannah Claire Brimlow. I'm a writer for Timcast.com. Thanks so much for having me on tonight. You can follow at Timcast News on Twitter and Instagram. It's the best. You can see work from me and all of our other journalists. If you want to follow me personally, you can find me on Instagram at hannahclaire.b, and you can follow me on Twitter at HCBrimlow. Thanks so much.
I am Ian Crossland. Follow me at iancrossland.net and subscribe to me on YouTube if you'd like to follow me at Ian Crossland anywhere else at Ian Crossland. I'll see you guys later.
I am at Serge.com. I'm just currently getting this new mixer to work, guys. So if it wasn't perfect in the audio, it will be soon. Yeah, let's have fun.
We will see you all over at timcast.com in about 10 minutes for the members only show. Thanks for hanging out.